It'll do it as a way to
Speaker's not working on this computer. Dogs, I've used it before, turn up volume. There we go. Hello?
You should feel welcome, and maybe I should have asked you earlier. Okay. Well, there's no pressure. Yeah.
That's good information.
Is there anything on here for you?
Did I silence my phone? No, you have to silence my phone. Silence. Oh, so we don't need. I'll put Steve behind me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lots of stuff.
Are there more handouts after this one? All right. If you have the copies, might as well, I would say. Because I feel like they're often requested.
Sit next to the employee.
I don't have any presenting to do tonight, and I'm happy about that because I'm not.
Yeah, I agree. Like 85 degrees.
Oh, those your handouts? Wait.
Yes, so.
Can I hand you one back? Oh, it doesn't really matter. I have an
Came back and
extra.
got cold again.
Oh, they're different. Sorry.
Thank you.
All right. Oh my goodness, I'm almost out of paper.
Yeah. It was very cool. Yeah, it was a great trip. I can see great, like, shockingly,
I have some filler
very
paper in the car.
adaptable. Yeah. I mean, there were moments, but they were awesome. And it was beautiful. The wedding was, and like incredible experience. Yeah, it's really cool. Great food.
Show you.
My kids didn't eat it, but.
Let's see, today is the 8th.
You showed that to me. Median income for Hopkinton.
Really?
Household.
Is what I.
Individual.
All right, guys, we're gonna,
The district.
or folks, sorry for that. We're gonna call to order the meeting tonight on January 8th. Thank you all for braving the windy and cold weather to make it out for civic participation this evening. We will start by a roll call to call the meeting to order, because we do have a member of the committee joining us online. So I think that means we need an individual voice vote, roll call
There's so
vote.
much echo.
So can I get a motion to call a meeting to order?
So moved.
Seconded, I think.
Yes.
All right. Do you want to start us off, Mr. Nato?
Sure. Rob Nato? Is that what?
Yeah, and then you just say aye.
Okay.
Yeah,
Aye.
yes.
Okay, I'm not sure. Yeah, we're okay, Steve.
Yeah.
You're up.
Yes, Ken Traumai.
Yes.
Yes.
Rich Houston, yes.
John Houston, yes.
Debbie Norris, yes.
Charlie Cummings, yes. Okay, and Steve?
Yes.
Great, thank you. And we are going to do the same for the approval of the public meeting minutes from the last meeting, which was December 11th as circulated by Neil. So any comments or modifications to the minutes? I think that was an echo.
Minutes.
Okay,
Second.
seconded. Did you have something to say, Charlie?
I was gonna second.
Okay, great.
Probably second.
Do you want to start us off with the roll call this time? We'll go the other direction. Charlie? Aye. Great.
Debbie Norris, aye.
Aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Yes. Aye.
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Sorry, was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, I let the record reflect that was a yes. All right, and so here we are at our first agenda item, our major agenda item of the evening, which is the presentation of
Your
the school
camera, I
district.
can help you fix it.
Can you mute Steve? For now. We are not going to yet move to the presentation of the school budget because Vicky kindly reminded me that we did not yet say the Pledge of Allegiance. So can I get a volunteer?
I'll volunteer.
Great, thank you so much. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Sorry for the disruption to the order. I was so antsy to get to our main agenda item, I guess. All right, so Mr. Nato, do you want to kick us off with the presentation?
This is like the battle between the needing the chair high and the table's too low. All right, I maybe just cut my legs off. Well, good evening, everybody, on this nice balmy evening here in Hopkinton. So you've got some handouts that I gave you. One is a copy of the slides. One is our special education primer, which is designed to be everything you would ever want to know about special education in about 5 pages. And then the other 2 pieces are the overviews of our HEA contract that has been approved by the HEA and voted on by the school board, as well as our Teamsters contract, which has also been voted on by the Teamsters and approved by the board. So with no further ado, off we go. I guess I've got the power here tonight. Maybe not. On, off, on the, tricky, Neil, tricky. There we go. So this is essentially, the slide that tells you what's coming. So we'll go over the key budget drivers. We'll look at some demographics, some enrollment and class size, by department details, and then the contracts and the trusts and the snapshot and the tax impacts at the end. If any point in time I get going too fast, if somebody could say, like I used to do in the back of the classroom, give me the slowdown symbol. Yeah, I'll give you that job, Rich. If I'm going too fast, you gotta do this. And I think as we go, I'll pause after each slide and just ask for questions as we move along, so we don't get lost in the weeds. So the first one up is the budget timeline. Not much change here from previous years. In September, the departments in the buildings begin their process. In October, the school board meets. We did 1 budget work session this year, not 2. And then that was also the point in time where we started our contract negotiations with both HEA and Teamsters. The budget work sessions in October are really the process of the department heads and the principals sharing with us these very large spreadsheets that we've seen before, going through those. For me, my process has always been, what did you ask for last year? What did you actually spend? Why is there a spread? And then looking at the individual items. November, we have some more presentations, and we had, our contract negotiations were ongoing. Into December, we started to whittle down our budget, looking at the tax rate, and we were able to finalize our HEA contract in January. And by January, I mean last night. We sort of dialed in this presentation through the school board. We also dialed in where our warrants are. We had sort of done a soft landing on that in late December, but last night was the night when we sort of came to some conclusions. So this is fresh, to say the least. So the budgeting goals, strive for stable funding for operational expenses. So what does that mean? I think when you see the individual building budgets, they are pretty lean. There's not a lot of increases there. The biggest changes are in special education, which is, again, our legal responsibility. The second big change that you see will be in facilities, which is about a $93,000 increase. That, I think, as everyone
Set it
knows.
as a default.
we-
You want me to reset it?
Oh.
Hey, folks, just a friendly reminder to mute. You might be able to mute on your side, Neil, if you have to.
The facilities budget is still in the catch-up process. So when we hired a facilities director, it was made clear to us that there was work to be done to get us to a point where we were where we should be with annual funding. And I think we're getting closer to that. So part of that is reflected there. Evaluate special education needs and the appropriate supports and budget for potential special education costs. So again, we've been over this piece. Currently, we are upside down. If you look at the last financial, at least $642,000. If you want to get into some of the other lines, it probably gets up over $700,000. We did remove $225,000 from our special education trust very recently, and one of the warrant articles is trying to address that. Reminding the committee that we had talked about how that should happen, and I'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to that warrant. Continue to move away from a large end-of-year fund balance, which I think we're getting closer to do. And, it certainly creates some anxiety. That's the goal, right? But when you look at our last financial, we're at $186,000 in fund balance. If you go year prior, we were at $508,000. So that fund balance is definitely coming down, which to me says we are budgeting more appropriately. With the caveat in mind, remember we go back to the municipal association discussion of a year and a half ago, the end of the year, if you have a fund balance that's somewhere around 2.5% to 5%, you've done a good job. So establish long-term planning and forecast long-term financial impacts and changes to the tax rate. Again, we have talked about how do you do that. So for us, we had a long discussion in the fall about setting those benchmarks and what we use. We talked about for education using wage standards for secondary education and issues with healthcare and those targets, not the CPI, not the PCE as a measure of what municipal costs are. So really for us, this is, the work of the long-term planning comes through our trusts. How do we use our CIP? How do we use our vehicle trust? Particularly now, how are we going to be using the special education trust, et cetera? And then negotiate 2 fair and fiscally responsible contracts, which I think we've done a pretty good job of. So that's what's on cue. So the first slide here, getting into the meat of things, is our key operational drivers. So this is on the operations budget. So special education, again, is our biggest driver this year at $777,000. These are things that are required by law. Oddly enough, we are also seeing a decrease in the state's support, which we'll feel the impact of next year. Some transportation and paving costs. Some of the transportation is predominantly in that special ed area, but we also have a new contract with First Student, which was about a 5% increase. And then technology updates, and you'll see those both in the technology department budget and then later in the ask for the warrant. So when you're looking at this, just sort of like get our mindset is, how hard are we working at staying level? If our increase is 956, I'm just going to use the left column numbers. And special education chews up 777,000. That leaves our other department increases at 178. The big hitters, the First Student contract at 36,000. Software subscription increases, we've all experienced those. $4,000. Diligent Community, which is our new system for sharing information with parents, with families, within the board, with the community. That's $8,000. Legal fees, based on actuals, we're looking at about a $10,000 increase there. Property and liability insurance up 9%, another 10,000. Technology. So this is to maintain current levels. So what does that mean? This goes back to things like the core of Chromebooks. It also goes back to all of the things that I don't understand how it makes all of these things possible, like servers and switches and Wi-Fi and the rest of it. It's still magic to me. The ELA curriculum supplies. So we adopted a new ELA curriculum last year called Amplify in the elementary schools. And there are supplies that go along with that. Most of the ELA curriculum adoption was done through a grant. So we didn't pay those upfront costs of $90,000, I believe, at the time. But we do have to pay these recurring costs for supplies for the kids. Paving and parking lot repairs, $36,000. So subtract all of that, and then other increases across all budgets is $23,000. So I guess the picture that I'm trying to create here is when you look at this very large dynamic, we've done a pretty good job of identifying where our big drivers are, and that what's left is a pretty small amount of money. Any questions on this one? Yes, Debbie.
Not really a question. I just would like to thank you for this. I really like the way that it's laid out and the way you took that special education. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have two questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Who gave us the grant to migrate to Amplify?
I have no idea. I knew we have a grant, but I don't know where it came from.
Okay, and then, so based on the New Hampshire Municipal Association's recommendation for the fund balance being somewhere between 2.5% and 5%. What does that mean for us in terms of this, if you used this year's budget?
Yeah. I think it means, and I would defer to the business administrator later, but I think what you're essentially looking at is a fund balance that's somewhere between 507 is probably normal.
$500,000 to $700,000.
Yeah. Again, you budget conservatively because unlike other entities, we're not allowed to deficit spend, or we certainly don't want to go back to the taxpayer during the year and say, we've come up short. So, yeah.
Absolutely. It's a balancing act.
Yeah. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay, Debbie?
Yes, I do have a question on the first student bus contract. And I apologize if this was already mentioned, but the 5% increase what is the reason that they gave?
Well, one, in part of the contract, they are using new buses in our district. So that's one of the things, but obviously fuel and then their wage costs have also risen. So just, yeah.
These are not electric. These
These are not. There are a small number. We did inquire about that at the time. And I believe that we were not one of the schools that was chosen to do that. Yeah. So the demographics here, projected enrollment used for budgeting, that's primarily around our class size policy business. Harold Martin School, 290, no difference. Maple Street School at 205, down about 13 kids, and the middle high school up about 5. So our total district-wide enrollment at 955. The next slide talks about this by class size. So you can kind of see where the changes have been. I would draw your attention to the 9th grade at 102, because that will come up later in the need for that English language arts teacher in the middle, well, in the high school, actually. We had talked about showing previous year's numbers, but it would skew things, right? Because it would all of a sudden, if we showed last year's 8th grade, it would look like we lost 32 kids, but it sort of cascades. So overall, there's a decrease of 8 students in the district at 955. Just to remind people, the class size policy, kindergarten, 18 kids in a classroom, 1 through 3 is 21, and 4 to 5 is 23. And after that, it becomes programmatic studies. This is what we're running. These are the people we need to make that all happen.
Sorry, after what grade it becomes programmatic?
In 6th grade.
6.
In 6th grade, the kids travel. There's science, math, English, social studies. So it's basically the middle school operating at Maple Street School, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Without all the fun stuff. So the total operating budget proposal is for $27,624,000, or $24,999, for a difference of $738,536, which is a percentage change of 2.79%, or 53.7 cents, or 54 if you round up. Again, I will pause for questions.
Do you know what the percent change is if you were to exclude the special education increase?
I do not. I could do that quickly, though, if you. I mean, I think that, well.
It's obviously well under a percent.
Yeah, negative. Thank you, Mark. We'll talk about, I think Krista, a ways back, we were talking about, what would be the percentage increase as we move other pieces into this. And so just to compare operating budget to operating budget, I mean, last year, obviously, our teachers were part of that, as were our Teamsters group. So if we were to add in the two contracts that are up for a vote, that would bring that number to 4.62%. So,
Just to clarify on Mark's question, I think it's actually a decrease.
yes,
Because the special ed budget is more than that.
is 777, yeah, thousand. So, yeah, I think without that special education increase, we would be in very good standing, but unfortunately, we are not. But so speaking of special education, this is a breakdown of that increase of that 777. So out of district school tuition at 578, out of district placements at 207. There is a decrease in contracted services. So that would be things like occupational therapy, speech, PT, et cetera. Either less of a need in-house or the ability to provide those services in-house, so we don't have to contract to a third party. In the special ed primer that you have, that looks like this, and certainly don't expect folks to read it now. I just want to hit a few of the highlights. So the percentage of students that we have receiving special ed services is 21% of our population. The statewide average is 19.67%. So it's pretty close within the norm. Within that document, you will also find a chart that shows you various disabilities and the data that goes along with that. There's also information about the reimbursements we receive. We talked about the amount that the state is going to change the proration, that when it's up and above that 72,000. So we get reimbursed for outplacements greater than 72,000, and we pay 20% of what comes next. The state is supposed to pay the other 80%. We did some calculations with the decrease in the proration from 87 to 66%. That would be a loss to us of $112,000, which, if you want to put that in terms of how it hits your pocket, that would be $40 for on the tax of a $500,000 loan. So again, another example of the state sort of downshifting costs to us for education. Any questions there?
I'm sorry, where was that on the paper?
It's in the packet.
Yeah, so it's in this primer. Right, so on the first,
Okay. I
Top
didn't
of
get
page
that far.
5.
yeah, top of page 5 is the one with most of the sauce in it.
Thank you.
You can see the proration, you see the 112,000. You can also see the Medicare reimbursement money, that comes in at 50% of costs. So the total reimbursements there last year were 109,000. This year, we're currently running at 29,000. So that's a big part of our process. It's also a task that needs to be carried out. It's fairly cumbersome. We actually have to use a third-party billing service to make that all happen, as well as staff to tag that information.
Could you clarify what is the difference between out-of-district tuition and out-of-district placements?
Trying to think about how to. So I think when we say placement, we mean tuition the student is going to a school, but perhaps not living there. Placement means residential.
This is probably not a question for you, Rob, and maybe more for Mr. Flynn, but it seems like the increased trend of the count of students supported for out of district placements, at least, started before
When you look at special ed overall, it's 20%, 25% of our budget because of staffing and IAs and all of the services that go along with that. Not to say that the out of district placements isn't large proportionally as you get to a per pupil scenario.
Next.
Does that make sense? Okay. Anybody else?
Just want to confirm, this 2.3 number reflects the decrease in state and Medicaid reimbursements expected in 25,
Which number are we?
the proposed, the 2.3.
Yes, that is what we are forecasting in terms of the expense side for this change. Not necessarily on the revenue side. That's a different, we have to keep those separate. But on the expense side, this is what we're looking at.
But therefore it's net of these reimbursements, of the difference in reimbursements, or no?
So this is where you have to keep that again, you have to keep the expense separate from the revenue, right? So we're just talking about expense here. And on the revenue side, you will see those changes
Got it.
arrive.
Got it.
So when you look at the monthly financial is, and then when we do that part of the budget, that information would be there.
So just stated more simply, that's how much you have to spend on special ed, regardless of where the money comes from, whether
Correct.
taxpayers or Medicaid or any other state reimbursement.
That is correct.
Should we let Mr. Nato keep going? Okay,
Okay.
great.
So I'm going to ask my pupils to put that primer down now so we can focus on the slides at hand. Teacher and me comes back again, sorry. I think I shut this thing off. Does it turn off on its own? Oh, there we go.
Yes.
Okay, salaries and benefits. So we have some decreases in salaries. We had a reduction of the assistant BA position, which we all knew was going to happen. And then this is includes the projection of teacher turnover, including early retirements. So that number is a decrease of 148,745, and then decreases in benefits. So when you go all in, so our health increases are 5.9%, our dental increases are 5%, but with the retirements and with changes to employee plans, the benefits in line is actually down $59,000. So we're seeing a drop there of 208,246.
Is that a result of a change in the contract or the mix of people?
This is based on current contract. So this is, people's selections of plans, people that might have been families that are now going to two, or people that are retiring, et cetera. And then the school does use a formula in terms of forecasting that, like a certain percentage will come in at family, certain percentage will come in at two-person, and a certain percentage will come in single. Other school districts, everybody is assumed to be on a family.
Rob, on the earlier page where you had key operational budget drivers.
Yep,
You had the total projected increase of 956,000.
yep.
Does that reflect the this decrease, or are you only reflecting increases there?
We're only reflecting increases to the budget on that budget driver piece, not decreases. I think, these slides are sort of trying to zoom in on where the things are soft and where things are seeing increases.
So does this assumes that the new contracts go into place because it's for 2025.
This does not assume that. This assumes current contract obligations.
Okay, bear with me, sorry. The new contracts though go into effect like in the summer, it says here, right?
Yep.
So wouldn't they,
When we get to the new contracts, you'll see the healthcare costs
yeah,
and savings. And there are actually healthcare savings in the first year on both contracts because of changes to it. But that is separate. If those contracts do not pass, then this is what we're looking at.
Okay.
Because the old contracts stay in place. So that's
Okay.
what we have to budget on.
okay, but let's just hypothetically assume that they do pass. Is this still a net reduction in salary and benefits? Because like, you see what I'm saying? Like, if these do pass, then these numbers are a little off, presumably. Probably not a lot off.
Right, so
but
I think
like-
you need to think of it as just two separate areas. So this reduction is still in place, right? But then you will see the impact of the contracts, and that's going to be all laid out in those slides. If you're asking me to morph those two things together right now, I don't think I can do that for you.
Okay, that's fair. All right. Keep going.
Okay,
I won't do that in my head.
I understand what you're saying, though. All right, facilities budget changes. This also includes our utilities. So major changes here. Most of the parking lots are in need of either paving, seal coating, or general repair. That's about $36,000. And then equipment replacement. This is things like our snow blowers, our cleaning machines, et cetera. The total difference in the facilities budget is $93,923. This is one of the budgets that we asked the superintendent to reduce after our first round. So that's our current place, and that's an increase of 10.01%. Reminder again, after the last bond, the call to the board was, let's not fall into this trap again because we've gotten behind on deferred maintenance. So this facilities budget is trying to mindfully reflect the need to maintain buildings so that we don't get in that scenario again, where we spend almost half of that $10 million on deferred maintenance projects. We can pay ourselves first with no interest, or we can have a bond and pay interest. I think the former is preferable. The technology budget changes, pretty small, $36,188. In fairness to the tech department, there's some changes to the phone system of $28,000, but there are also situations where the phone line, another budget line at Harold Martin School at Maple Street, the SSU, all got moved to the tech department. So to consolidate those things into one place where they fit best. So again, this is pretty lean considering that transfer of accounting. Curriculum budget changes, pretty small. Again, the Amplify workbooks, other printed materials that go along with that. The reduction of Rubicon, you're probably all wondering what Rubicon is, but that was a curriculum management system. We started something called curriculum mapping a couple of decades ago, where we take our curriculum and match it to how we're living up to state standards. It gets refined, and then it goes into the storehouse so that other teachers can use it, and we can sort of track those changes. That work has been done, and there is not a need for Rubicon, so that system is going away, although that information is retained. The Harold Martin School budget changes. I have to give kudos to both Harold Martin School and Maple Street School because I've got to switch the slide. There we go. Move their phone budget to the technology. Whoops, sorry. A couple of whiteboards, reduction in software licenses. Actually, a decrease 394. They're doing a great job of keeping their budgets lean and finding ways to save money. Same is true at Maple Street School. Again, their phone budget got moved to the tech line, negative 0.02%. We asked them to be lean. We asked them to be lean last year. And again, they've come through that this year. The middle high school, a little bit of a different scenario, but still a pretty small increase in terms of the nominal number. The percentage looks big, but the proposed budget is $321,000. So increases in supplies, dues, and fees, and then a scheduling software system called MyFlex. So what that is, the middle high school has a period during the day where kids are assigned to teachers and they can move about for support or if they need to go see a teacher, et cetera. In the past, as people were moving, it was you would literally write a pass for somebody. So I write a pass for Charlie and he goes over to Mark's classroom. But the only people who knew that was me and Mark. In MyFlex, everybody can see it. So if somebody's wondering where that student is, they know exactly where the person is. If they want to see that student, they can tell if the student is available to be sent to their room, et cetera. So that was a change there. When you look at the supplies on this one, I made a note to myself. Middle high school is a big place with a lot of sub-departments. You got your office, the guidance, social studies, English, math, science, unified arts, world language. So books, software, subscriptions, supplies, furniture. Again, $18,000 increase seems like a fair amount to be moving in the right direction. The athletics budget up $4,200. Most of that is travel and fees. So very minor increase there as well. We did spend some time during the budget process talking about some big needs. One of them was for an athletic trainer in some way, shape, or form. A difficult position to hire for, certainly not one that we can afford in a full-time way, but it's still something that will be looked towards in the future. How do we make sure we have the right people on staff during games for students and even, practices?
Can you explain what the role of an athletic trainer is? And
Sure.
we need one? Or
Yeah.
Part-time one or full-time one?
So athletic trainers at most schools play a couple of different roles. My experience when I was in private school was the athletic trainer was there if kids who were injured or needed, say you needed an ankle tape. That's not necessarily something a coach is qualified to do. Oftentimes they do it, but they probably shouldn't. So that would be the role of the athletic trainer. If you had a kid who was injured, they'd go see the athletic trainer. They would diagnose and set up a treatment plan or a recovery plan, et cetera. During games, you have a person who can deal with, essentially an emergency situation and know exactly what to do before EMTs get there or if that's necessary. So it's a liability issue. And, at the collegiate level, you would always see an athletic trainer at every event. Actually, I have a good friend who just, he's now the athletic trainer for the University of Nevada Alpine ski team. I told him he now gets paid to play on his skis and hope nothing happens. But, it's a small thing. We do have to give thanks to the Stockwells who have filled in a great deal, especially when we have, homecoming events. Their willingness to do that has been great, and they've served that in that capacity a number of times over the years. But it's just a difficult position to fill and can be an expensive one if you're going to hire that job. It's certainly nothing that we can afford at this point in time.
Would you ideally want a part-time or a full-time?
I think ideally, that's a tough question. It depends how you want to do it. If you want somebody just to service games, that's one scenario. If you want somebody to service student athletes from, oftentimes schools will do it. The person arrives just at the end of the day and is there for practices and games. But just to be aware of that, you know, certainly nothing that's on the table. The SAU budget changes, so transportation contract, we already talked about. That does not include our special education transportation costs. Property liability insurance up 9%. Panda docs, which, you know, sounds something that's cute and maybe wear on your feet, I'm not really sure, but it's a DocuSign software program. So all of those waivers that we can now have parents do online instead of sending things home and hoping they come back. The Medicaid billing system and the phone system have been moved to the appropriate budgets. So again, Medicaid, the billing costs there about $24,000 and the phone system move was about $1,300. So overall increase $18,000 in the SAU budget. Any questions there? Okay. So the only staffing changes that are in the budget this year, we have our reduction of our assistant business administrator. So that's coming off the books. We do have the need for an additional English teacher at the middle high school. And we do have the need for 2 additional IAs to support IEPs at Harold Martin School. So I think the IAs at Harold Martin School speak for themselves. When an IEP gets written, part of that is going to determine whether or not the student needs an instructional assistant to be a part of that. The middle high school, or I gotta stop saying that, the high school English teacher, yes, ma'am.
Sorry, Rob, so the IAs are folks that will like. Those will be like the one-to-one folks helping the students directly.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So if you remember back, we talked about that large class coming out of the 8th grade and going into the 9th grade of 102 students. And for those of you that have had kids recently in the high school, that's a pretty large number. So it is a manageable task, a difficult task when you're in middle school, when the kids are all taking the same courses. Class sizes go up. It's not ideal, but it was manageable. When they get to the high school, and now the kids are not taking all the same courses, it becomes far more complex. So we're not going to be able to just divide evenly and say, well, there's going to be 25 kids in every English class or 20. That's not going to work. So there is a need to increase the number of English teachers to support that almost 20% increase in general class size. What is essentially happening is in the current budget, I'm going to slow down here because it gets a little weird. In the current budget, and by that I mean this year in operation, there are 2 teachers that are working an extra 5th. In other words, they're teaching 6 classes instead of 5. What is going to occur is we will hire 1 English teacher. Those 2/5 that are now occupied by English teachers, one will go to the science department and 1 will go to the social studies department. So that will help lower the burden of providing enough courses and appropriate class sizes for this large class that's coming in. So it's one increase, but it's going to benefit 3 departments.
A full-time?
Yes.
And what happened? Sorry, go ahead, Mark. No, I talked a lot.
Rob, for the 2 IAs at Harold Martin, is that in part to one of the things that really struck me in the special ed memo or the bulletin is 37% of the pre-K class having IEPs. Seems like a remarkably high percentage of pre-K age students or have that designation.
Yeah.
Is that related to, is that an aberration? I mean, I don't know if you know, but like it strikes me as an unusually high number. And is it related to the need for 2 additional IAs?
I don't know specifically where those IAs are going to be deployed, so to speak, but I would say that certainly probably has something to do with it. I don't have a specific answer for you on that. Debbie?
Oh, yeah.
Rob, I understand that it's not in my question is not to determine, and have you justify we need another teacher. That's the purview of the school. But on a budgetary standpoint, at that higher number of students, it seems that in the past, hasn't it been that oftentimes we lose students as they enter through the cycle of high school? They go to different, they move, or they just go to different schools. So with that said, hiring another teacher, and let's say that number doesn't stay that for more than another year. So by 10th grade, they've kind of dissipated out by 4, 5, 6 students. What accommodations could be made? Because then now we're looking at a new hire on a contract.
Yeah, I think that, you're correct. It's sometimes we do lose some students when they go from 8th grade to 9th grade. That's when they make the decision to, go to a different school, Derryfield, et cetera, Bishop Brady. Given the size of this, it would be out of the ordinary that many students would leave. Then that would be beyond the norm of what it is. So I think it's fair to forecast that this number is, whether it's 102 or 98, it is still a very, very high number to try and service all those kids with enough classes that makes sense. And again, it's a flexibility and scheduling issue as much as it is anything. When kids take different courses, you might end up, I can remember years teaching economics where I might have 27 kids in one class and 13 in the other, because that's when a certain math class was running. So they couldn't be scheduled into the other class. It's just in a small school with a lot of singletons meaning that class runs once, scheduling can be a nightmare. And with that many kids, it becomes more of a nightmare, which means we end up with more kids in study halls, which is the last thing we want. We're paying for a good education. Let's give them opportunities to take courses.
So relatedly, is the plan then, because that class is going to be in 9th grade, but then they're going to be in 10th grade and 11th grade. So is the plan that a teacher kind of floats up with that? Because the next one down is 67.
Right. No, so when you think about departments, so these kids are now going to go into 10th grade and now they're going to have the opportunity to take electives. So now you're going to need to maybe instead of one section of that elective, 2 sections of that elective
Right.
so it's just going to continue to flex throughout their 4 years in high school.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is like, it's not like the year after next year, the need for that teacher will just go away because that bubble class will continue to need extra support until 12th grade.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. 4 years from now, that may be a different situation, depending upon how class sizes go. Good question. Thank you.
Rob, you had a prior slide on salaries and benefits going down 208,000. Could you explain that compared to this slide?
So this is a staffing budget change. This is looking at not only the salary, but also the benefit decreases. I'm not sure. I guess it's redundant in some ways because we have the ABA here and we also have the ABA there. But we're not, this is an explanatory slide, the one that we're looking at. The other one was a budgetary slide. Does that help with what I'm not sure I'm understanding your question.
The English teacher and the 2 IEPs?
Say that again, please.
It would include the additional English teacher and the 2 IEPs.
Yes, it does.
So wouldn't they be included in the slide that says salaries and benefits?
I see what you're saying. So we should have had increases on this slide that says salaries and benefits, noting that.
That's what I'm asking.
Gotcha. That's just, that's something I think that maybe when we review this again, we should morph these two together.
Got it. So just to be clear,
I think what you're
the
saying.
the decrease in 208,000 is net of these changes. This is just broken out in detail,
Correct.
staffing detail.
I think it's net of the 134,000 is included in both, but the other two were not.
Well, I think the dollars are. I think there's just not a bullet point explaining it. Is that right? As in like,
Has to include the dollars.
I'm sorry, Mark.
I mean, I just assume these are three particular staffing changes that you
Yeah.
called out.
Right.
But the previous slide is the totality of all the
Yes.
salary
Yeah,
and benefits.
yeah.
So it does include these. These are just three popped
we have
out.
emphatic
as
nodding from the
particularly
audience.
large.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
This, I think there's just, it's like a little incongruous because overall there's a reduction. This suggests an increase,
Yeah.
but this isn't telling the whole picture.
Yes, and I think that, when we get to school district meeting, you'll see this in a slightly different format, that it puts that all together in one, because I think it's two slides that should have been one. And that's part of the reason why we do this process and why we get feedback from you guys. So thank you.
Two of the positions cancel out to zero, so it's only up under 19,000.
Yeah, it's really, when you look at it, it's $120,000. That makes sense? I'm not going here. Try again. There we go. Okay, so the next slide is our FTE slide. So we can see on the district, there is a reduction of 2. That is the business administrator and the curriculum coordinator position. Harold Martin School, there is an increase there. That is your IAs. And then Maple Street is staying flat. The middle school is dropping down, but really those IAs are moving into the high school, moving with students. And the high school also reflects that increase of 1 on the English side. So you see the full-time FTE is going from 197 to 198.73, which is an odd thing to think there is 0.73 of a person out there, but I guess that's how the math works out. And that's all staff, right? That's administrators, that's teachers, that's the whole shoot match. Any questions there?
So back to page 2, anticipated class sizes, and then comparing that to full-time employees, FTEs. It looks like, 4, 5, and 6 are going down. Grades 4, 5, and 6 are going down 13 students. And it looks like K1, 2, well, K1, 2, 3 is going to be decreasing in students.
Can you back up to your first statement? Because can you say that again?
Sure. Comparing full-time employees.
Yep.
Which is our very last slide, with anticipated class sizes. We're going to be decreasing 4, 5, and 6 by 13 students. According to projected enrollment.
Okay, so these are the kids that actually exist. These aren't changes in the number of kids. These are the kids that will be in these classes next year.
Oh, next year.
Yeah.
Okay. So just looking over the general number of students anticipated, looks like the total number of students is going down
By 8, correct?
before 4, 5, and 6. It looks like when those classes come up, the number of kids in the Maple Street is going to continue to go down because those class sizes are smaller. My question is, anticipating that those classes are probably going to be getting smaller, is it possible to reduce a position ahead of time in the Maple Street school?
Ahead of time.
Ahead of time, knowing that there's smaller classes coming up into Maple Street.
So I think if I'm correct, so next year you do see a decrease to 60 kids that will be in grade 4 and an increase to 77. My understanding, and Mr. Flynn can correct me later on when we get to the Q&A part, but that there's going to be a swap. Currently, there are 4 teachers, I believe, in grade 4 and 3 in grade 5, and I think that's going to rotate. So there will be 4 in 5 and 3 in 4.
Well, I'm just looking at that 53 in grade 2
Mm-hmm.
and the 65 in grade 1. That's going to eventually replace that 77 and 68.
I'm gonna just say, Rich, we're dealing with what we know to be true for next year, not what might be true.
Okay, yeah.
And we're also not forecasting into the future what might happen. We do this on an annual basis. That's why we built the class size policy so that we could adjust to what we know to be true. If anything, given what I've seen is we're seeing people coming into the school district, not necessarily going out of the school district, but these are actual numbers based on our class size policy, number of teachers that we need. I see what you're saying is that down the road, as if it's a class of, 50 at Maple Street where the class size policy is slightly higher, will you need fewer staff according to the class size policy? Yes, you will, but that's down the road.
Yeah, it's just tough for me to justify. I mean, yes, we have, hold on here, where am I? We have a large class coming through in ninth grade, so we have to hire somebody. But then we also see small classes coming up, so can't we be looking at next year reducing a staff member?
That would be in next year's budget. Not in this year's budget.
Okay.
Okay, we can't reduce what we think is going to happen next year when we're forecasting for what we know to be true this year.
That's true. Thank you.
Rob,
You good? Okay.
Was that, I think I've heard somebody, yeah. Let me see if
Yeah,
I can-
hey, Rob.
Yes, Steve.
I'm gonna follow up on I think what Rich was driving at. We run 3 schools, and granted they are somewhat discrete schools, but is it possible that somebody at one of the other schools has their credentials and the time in their schedule to jump up and cover those classes that we need for the larger class it's cycling through, going back to the theme of us having to think a little more outside the box?
Are you referring to the incoming ninth grade class?
Yeah, what I'm asking is that if there's, have we looked if there's teachers in the other 2 schools that have the credentials and the time in their schedule that they could get a little stipend or whatever to jump up to the high school and teach a couple of those classes?
So I think that the teachers it would be Harold Martin School in the middle school, in Maple Street.
Yes.
So they probably don't have the credentials for that.
Okay.
I don't think they also have the capacity because the teachers that we have employed there are full-time teachers in where they are working. It has been historically that, yes, people have taken on extra fifths in the middle high school, and sometimes it's a middle school teacher that might pick up a high school class, or vice versa. I mean, both of those things have happened where you don't have to hire a new employee. However, in this situation, that's also a choice on the part of the teacher to do that. I can state from experience, teaching 6/5, in other words, teaching 6 classes instead of 5, is quite burdensome because not only is it an extra class, it's an extra preparation. But I think that was explored, and that was part of the reason why you saw the extra 2/5 already in place in the English department. So now we're in a situation where the best way to slay this dragon is to hire that full-time person. Then the science and the social studies folks are going to pick up an extra 5th somewhere. So somebody's going to have to assume those roles. You're almost never going to be able to hire somebody just to teach a 5th from outside. So that is already happening and in place. Steve, if that all made sense.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that somebody is asking these types of questions and I'm not sure if that's the business person, if it's the school board when they're making the budget, or who actually asks that kind of question to see if that's even a possibility.
Sure. So first of all, the role would be the superintendent in his leadership group, which would be the principals. And that is something that commonly occurs where they're going to look at, and that's why we have these extra 5ths and people who teach those extra courses, because It is far cheaper to pay already hired employee that you're paying salaries and benefits to pick up that extra class and to try to go outside where now you have to pay perhaps partial benefits. So that is a very, very common practice and has been for decades in the middle high school.
Okay, well, thank you.
May I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Are the folks who are teaching an extra fifth reflected in the FTEs as 1.2 people?
They would. Yeah, I believe so. Can I go to the next slide? All right. All right, so I guess we're back to the redundancy of this slide. So this is where our ask is at 2.79% on the operating budget. I will, again, go back to, I think Krista made a good point a few meetings ago. What's the all-in when we add in those two contracts, which is actually our operating budget or will be our operating budget in the next financial cycle. So that would be 4.62% once we look at those contracts. And we'll get into contracts next.
Quickly before we get into contracts, sorry to go back to this.
Yep.
It was mentioned in passing and I understand it was discussed elsewhere, but the curriculum director kind of going away. Is that reflected in these numbers already?
So the current plan with that situation is, and we discussed it at the board level, sort of when this came. When the superintendent, where's our greatest need right now? So we had a great need in curriculum 2 or 3 years ago, for sure. And many of those things have been addressed. Math curriculum, ELA curriculum, there is more work to be done. Certainly, most folks would say in a school system, you should have a curriculum coordinator, particularly when you have 3 different schools. We have cobbled that together over the years. However, it's quite clear that our special education needs are quite high. So essentially, I think what you'll see is the curriculum coordinator position is going to go away, and those funds would be used to deal with that special education need, most likely in the form of a new case manager, but it's not within the budget because it's not a change in personnel. It's a reallocation of.
Okay, so to be clear, the FTE and funds are reflected in the account and the budget. And just whether that person is a curriculum director or is a case manager is a staffing decision.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, does that individual, is she leaving the district? Or is she staying?
The position is being removed.
Is the person being removed?
That is a question that I can't answer in a public session.
Okay.
Actually, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I think a lot of times this committee says, instead of hiring someone, can we replace them with someone or move things around? And so I just wanted to say thank you to the superintendent and the board for figuring out a way to fund a necessary position without adding a full-time employee.
Thank you. I would concur with that.
Back just before we hop into the contracts, I just wanted to ask a question regarding the technology budget and the phone system. So I think you said something like $28,000. So is that an increase of $28,000, or is that just moving the existing $28,000 into that budget?
I think there's a combination going on there, and this is again where, my capacity for what's happening is some of it is movement and some of it is changes that need to be made to the phone system. Those two variables.
Changes that need to be made to the phone system related to the safety audit?
It may be. That's a squishy answer, but I don't know. So I'll just say maybe.
Okay.
There's a lot of committees that we have on a school board. So it's a lot to keep track of, but I would say that's probably true. Communications is a key piece. It's some of the things that we've seen through grants. If you've tried to come into one of the schools recently, you're going to be buzzing in and all that kind of thing.
Okay, so last question. You
Yep.
said that you're working hard to project into the future, which we appreciate. And I was wondering, when we make decisions regarding new software systems, like Village and Community, Panda Doc, and MyFlex, are we asking them about potential increases over time to the subscriptions?
I would assume so, yes. That's not my personal job, but I would assume that anybody who's buying a new service wants to know what the long-term forecast is.
Okay, I have one last question before we move to contracts. Are we legally obligated to provide? So let me just start by saying, I am not suggesting that we shouldn't be doing this. To be clear, I have a pre-K kid, but just as a understanding matter, are we legally obligated to provide special ed to pre-K, given that pre-K is not a, like lots of school districts don't have pre-K?
Right. There is, I believe, and again, I will defer to Mandy on this and then follow up, but you are legally obligated to start a screening process.
Okay,
So the answer to that, my understanding is yes. At what age that occurs, I am not completely sure, but I want to say age 3 to 4. Is Mike giving me the thumbs up back there?
yeah,
Thank you, Mike.
3, according to our audience. Okay, thank you.
You good? Yep. We're an hour and 10 in, folks. It's a long way to go. If anybody wants to take a little break, let me know. Okay, the HEA contracts. This is in 2 slides. So the first slide in the HEA contract is our teachers. The total number of employees are 103, although there are fewer people in the association than that. So first of all, I want to thank the HEA, Scott Zipke, for what was a very dynamic and positive negotiation session. Took place over the course of a couple of months. It was interesting for me because my last experience was sitting on the other side of that table. So it was a good opportunity as a board member to discuss needs and concerns directly with the staff. And that's not something you typically get to do as a board member. As we all know, the superintendent runs the schools. So that's not a direct channel that we have. So it is that opportunity to do that. And I felt that it was very, very positive. So to the crux of the matter, the key changes, the first one is changes to insurance cost shares. This is something that we all have been talking about and that has been talked about at this committee for quite a long time. So we were at 93.7 cost share with teachers picking up 7% of those costs. And as you can see in the grid, so our driver plan is that Anthem Blue SOS 20. That's the one that the school district says that we will pay for. And if there are differences above that, it used to be in the old days, there were plans that were higher. And if people wanted them, they had to pay the difference. Those have been removed. This is our driver plan. So the cost share premiums move up in the 3 years of the contract, as you can see, to 10%, 12%, and 15%. If a person chooses the SOS 25, which is a less expensive plan, then the cost share drops to 7, 10, and 10. That was done for, essentially because those plans are significantly cheaper, we could afford to have a lighter cost share, also part of the negotiation process. The open access high deductible plan, so this is a little bit different, came in a little bit late in the game, but again, the cost shares are 7, 10, and 10. And on the right-hand side, just to explain that, on the first two, the SOS 20 and the 25, the school district picks up a portion, the first 50% of the deductible. And you get an HRA card, if you will, and you can use that for deductibles, doctor's appointments, et cetera. And then the employee picks up the second half of that deductible. So for instance, in the SOS 20, the deductible for a family plan is $3,000. So you get an HRA card for $1,500. The person would pick up anything after that. In the SOS 25, those numbers go up to $1,000, $3,000, and $4,550. So the deductibles are higher. In the high deductible plan, it's an HSA, not an HRA. And the difference there is for an HRA plan, whatever the school district puts forward or budget is for that is not used gets returned to the school district. In an HSA plan, you get the money on that card, but it stays with you. It's an accruing account year to year. The high deductible plan is significantly cheaper, so it still made sense. And, you know, obviously we did all the actuaries on this that it worked out for us in terms of where those numbers would be. So we feel like really, really strongly that this was an important part for us in terms of meeting the goal of increasing cost shares. There was a question asked last night from Rick McMillan, which I thought was great. Thank you to him. What does that actually mean, right? Like 10%, 12, like what does that mean? So I did a little math at 3:23 this morning, and that's when I started my day today. Anyway, so a family plan on the SOS 20 is $37,000 in change. So at 7%, the person would be contributing $2,624 under our current contract. In this new contract, at 10%, the cost share, what the employee will pay is $3,748. At 12%, it's $4,498. And at 15%, it's $5,632. Simple math is, from the beginning of the contract to the end, there's a $3,000 increase in what the employee will be paying for their health insurance. Any questions on that part? Okay. Increases to the wage base. So in the first year, 4.75% is the increase. And then in the second and third year, it's 3.75%. Part of that math, as anybody who's ever negotiated knows, if you want something, you have to give something. So in the first year, in order to make people whole as their cost share is going up, that raise needed to be a little bit higher to make up that difference. Let me switch to this next slide here. So these are the costing elements to the contract. And we'll just walk through year one. So the wage increases represent a $571,000 increase. Schedule D, which doesn't mean anything to anybody unless you know this contract, is the individual subcontracts that we have for department heads, coaches, club advisors, etc. So there's a whole system for that. The increase to Schedule B is $25,788. Healthcare, due to the changes in cost share, and also to our assumption that some people will switch over to the SOS 25, is $97,000 in that first year. The dental we'll see is still, paid at 100%, but we were able to switch to a different plan that saved us money. So it's essentially a switching what you're going to pay 80% of for them. And that was, everybody seemed good with that one. So the life insurance in the old contracts was 1.5 times salary. We reduced that to 1 time salary. So there's a small savings there. The curriculum hourly rate saw an increase in the contract. It was $32 per hour. That has been increased to $40. I can tell you that $32 had been in there for well over 10 years. And then there was an early retirement increase as well. So in our early retirement system, if you choose to retire at 55, the amount you would receive was $47,000, and then it decreases by $2,000 till you get to 60, and then the decreases begin to be like $4,000 or $5,000. What we did was we increased the early retirement benefit for ages 55, 56, 57, 58, and 59, but not to 60, 61, 62, 63, and 64. So those stayed the same. The first 5 years went up by $2,000 each. A little bit more of an incentive. We get the most bang for our buck if we get people like me to retire early at 57 years old, and you hire a person who's younger at a lower cost. So was our logic there, and that's also how we see our cost savings in those areas play out over time. And then below that, you can see again the cost share, the driver plan, the 2040, 10%. The healthcare plan of the 2550 at 7. The tax rate per thousand for the contract in the first year is 32 cents, 32.7 cents. For a $500,000 home, that'd be $163. I'm gonna take a drink of water. In years 2 and 3, the wage costs 532, and then in year 3, 537. Schedule B drops down because those have now essentially been in place. So this is just increases that we might see from people moving from, it was a 3-track system to now a 2-track system. The healthcare benefits decrease because you're going to see most of those savings in that first year. And then the dental is already there and the life insurance is already there. The other stuff is already in place. So I will pause and wait for questions.
Hey, Rob?
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, so, in previous years, because obviously the health insurance has been something we've discussed quite a bit, that there was a differential with new teachers coming in, that we were offering them less payment on their health insurance. I think to reflect maybe what some other local districts were doing. Am I misunderstanding that? I'm not really seeing that in this contract.
Yeah, you know what, Steve, you and I had the same misunderstanding. I thought when we went in negotiation, the same was true, but no, everybody was paying 93.7. There's the 90-10 split is on the Hess contract.
Okay. Understood.
A negative hit that we get on the mod, which was so bad severe last year, does that improve this year?
I don't know what that is. Like, you know, our increase to the healthcare is under 6%. So I'm assuming that that had something to do with that, but I don't know what the mod is.
It's well over 100% before.
Yeah. So just again, for people listening that, you know, the mod refers to what is our usage compared to how much we're paying in last year when we had that big 19% hit. We were giving them $100 for in spending $140. Not a good insurance scenario to be in.
Rob, could you explain how step increases fit into this?
Sure. So if you look within the contract, there is a step system. So there's a BA track. I think it's a B30. I think the B15 is gone. Don't quote me on that. And then there's a master's track, a master's 15, and a master's 30. So as you progress in your first year of experience, you get hired. And in the second year, you move up a step. And that is calculated at 0.5, a 5% change to the step. The way the increases work is it's a 4.75% change to the base. So if you change, you're changing the 4.75 is the first year. So BA1, that's where you see it, and then it ripples through the rest of that system.
And in terms of the percentage increases and the different steps, is that changed at all under this contract?
No. Hi, Vicky.
Hi. Okay, I think I speak for everyone and say we really appreciate the months of time that went into this succinct chart. And the administration team and the school board team and the HEA team that all met and negotiated and read and came back to the table. And that we appreciate you sort of using your different options of leverage to benefit the teachers and consider the community and taxpayers. So with regards to the anticipated health savings, did we estimate certain number of people opting into the newer plans, or are the anticipated cost savings assuming everyone stays with the driver plan?
We anticipated 5 people moving from SOS 20 to SOS 25. We didn't anticipate anyone moving to the high deductible plan because that would be
I mean, the person who would move into the high deductible plan, just philosophically speaking, would be someone young, healthy, who probably doesn't think they're going to need much health insurance. So they're going to save money, not only in their paycheck, but they're also going to get an HSA that is going to accrue over time. That's probably that person. But for accounting purposes, it was not advised to do that.
And so that would just be like bonus points.
That would be, and it would be bonus savings. Just to give you a touch of what these costs are, and I'll use the family numbers. The SOS 20 for a family is 37,488. The SOS 25 is 29,100.
What was the first one again, please?
37,488. And for a single, it's 13,884 and 27,768 for a double. Any other questions on the HEA contract? Okay. Teamsters. Teamsters is essentially our custodian and maintenance staff. Again, a similar scenario. Known Joe Case for a long time, conversations when I was teaching there. So it's good to sit down with Joe and Brian and the Teamsters representative to review, their situation and their contract. And thank you to them for the process, which was, started probably late November and ended just early January. So here again, the cost shares increase. They were at 6%, and they're moving to 7, 8, 9, and 10%. The reasons why those cost shares are lower is essentially because their salaries are lower. So, to ask for 15% of a smaller salary would be a big ask, and probably not one that anybody would be willing to negotiate. We did add the SOS 25 to their program as well at those same cost shares. We did remove 2 higher premium plans that had been previously there, Blue Choice 3T and the Access Blue 5. Just for, and I think I can share this now that negotiations are over. We did look at other plans for them because the Teamsters have a health group that they wanted to explore, and we did that with them. That option would have cost more money. They were not interested, they being the Teamsters group. So, if they had wanted it, it was on the table, but we did look at other options, and as we typically do. And all of these contracts, by the way, speaking of healthcare, have clauses built into them that allows us to sit down at the table and reassess our healthcare situation. So in the HEA contract, it would be in the second year of the contract where we would have that option to do that. And by reopen, I mean discuss. That doesn't mean we can, force something upon them. The increase for the Teamsters is a 3.8% increase in wages to their base scale in each of the 4 years. And I'm going to switch to the next slide here. So we're looking at $39,000 in the first year, $39,193. There is some healthcare savings, and there's also some dental savings because they made the same switch that the HEA group did. Life insurance, we did an increase from 25K to 50K in this contract, so a slight increase there. There was a slight increase in the compensation for work apparel. Went from $200 a year to $350 a year. And the cost shares are the same. So the cost on this one is 2.8 cents. And on a $500,000 home, $13.80. A couple of notes, just so you know what you're increasing by 3.8%. In the first year of the contract, which is a 10-year step, it's $19.91. So if you're hired year one, no experience, year one at the end of the contract would be move up to $26.59. So in 4 years, that entry level employee would be making $26.59. I'm sorry, that is incorrect. I need to take another drink of water. Year one, 1991. In year one, in the fourth year of the contract's $22.28. That makes more sense. In year one, the person who's at the 10th step is making $26.59, and in year four, $29.75. We made a few other slight changes here. We included a single health insurance buyout to this, and that was put in place because it seems odd. Why would you offer a buyout for a single plan? But if you hire somebody who is 26 or under, they can stay on their parents' health insurance and simply receive the buyout. So it saves them money out of their paycheck. It saves us considerable money if they were to do that. And that would be part of the onboarding process, just to explain to people that those are options. A couple other, minor financial changes. So there was always this issue about night custodians when they work day would lose money because that's a different rate. Now, and in the summertime is when that typically happens. Now, when those night custodians come on and work the day shift, they will keep their night pay that is typical throughout the year. And they will also all work one shift instead of having this elongated time period during the year. So, ready for questions on Teamsters if there are any.
Rob?
Why is it a 4-year contract where the teachers are 3?
I'm so happy you asked that question.
Oh,
Yeah, okay. So my life from October to December was negotiation. And we are now putting 2 contracts in front of the voters in the same year. What we did last year was we did the Hess contract. They're all now set up so that we will not be bringing forward more than 1 contract in 1 year, hopefully ever again. So that's the reason why this one's 4, that one is 3. The Hess contract will be up and the whole cycle will be 1 per year. And we won't get into this conundrum where we're bringing forth this twice. Yes, it is. It will be.
Steve, do you have a question?
Yeah, so not specifically a question, but I just want to share some feedback that I've received because obviously these contracts have been kind of out in public for the last couple of weeks. Over the last 3 budget cycles, the town employees have gotten just under a 10% raise. So I think there's a lot of people that feel that that was kind of the benchmark that should have been set for everybody. I understand that there's some different considerations with a teacher's contract, but I have heard that from a lot of people, and nothing that can be done now, but that was probably something that should have been factored in to the negotiations.
I can understand the sentiment, but I don't negotiate for the town. I negotiate for the school district and negotiating with the body that is in front of me. And it's also in a climate where it is very, very difficult. We went through a long drought of not having custodians because we simply couldn't hire anyone. So just to be forthright about part of the process, when you do any negotiation, you look at comps and you look at other towns. So when you look at a teacher's contract, what are people making in Bow? What are people making in Concord, Kearsarge, communities similar to ours? We did the same with custodians. And in fairness, our custodian pay is on the higher end of those comps. In my mind, in this situation, in this labor market in New Hampshire, where we all talk about the state of the economy, but we also know that our unemployment rate is very low and the labor market is very tight. We're not necessarily competing with other towns for custodians. We're competing with the labor market for workforce, people who are willing and able to come in and do this job and do it well. And, you know, when the starting wage is $19.91, and as all of you know, there are a number of placards up just about anywhere where you can make $15 at a job that, you know, is not the same. So that was part of what we went forward. I understand that, but we have two municipal functions going on here. And I feel, I'm sorry that people feel that way, but I don't know what I can tell you about it beyond, yeah, that's the town's job, and this is our job.
So on especially the teacher's contract, because that's a much larger raise over 3 years, do we actually have comparisons? I know you know, when we renegotiated it 3 years ago, we had comparisons to other towns. Do we have that information now that we can release to our taxpayers?
I don't have that with me tonight, but yeah, we do have comps from, you know, other school districts where the pay scales are. And part of that pay scale and looking at those comps is you also need to dig into the benefits package and what those are, because it's the totality of those items. It's not just what the salary scale is.
Understood. So if that, you know, if we have that kind of information that we can release, I think that's gonna help everybody. But thank
Sure.
you.
Yep, absolutely. Anything else on Teamsters contract? Okay, the Special Education Trust, so this is a warrant article.
Actually, sorry, Rob,
Yes,
just
ma'am.
out of curiosity, roughly what is like the median salary for a teacher in Hopkinton? Or mean?
Hmm.
Either.
I'm guessing, right? I'm guessing.
Within, like, honestly, a $10,000 range.
65 to 70. We've got a pretty mature staff. I'd have to look to Laura for that information, and that's something we could get, but
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
that's just guessing.
So I would just actually contextualize that, like, because if you at least take like the first year's raise for a teacher making it roughly that amount, it comes out to something like $3,200-ish, depending on what number you're using. And the increase, the healthcare premium, at least at 10% of $37K, is about $3,700. So, you know, I would just set context to, like, at least in the first, obviously the benefits accrue to you in years 2 and 3, but at least in your first year, kind of the additional salary, you're kind of covering your healthcare premium with it.
Yes,
That math is like roughly right?
that is roughly correct.
Thanks.
Yes. All right, this is a warrant article for the Special Education Trust. We've already talked about this here. Actually, we have great feedback from the folks here on the Budget Committee about this. So we had $225,000 in our special education budget for unanticipated students that we might come. So this is looking at, you know, you don't know in March what your enrollment is going to be in special ed. People move in, people move out, but we've seen that more often than not, those costs are increasing. It was discussed here that if we put it in the budget line and it didn't happen, then it's in the budget line. So that may not be the best way to do it. And we talked about making it a warrant so that people knew exactly what it was going to be for. If it wasn't used, it stays in the trust for situations like we're in right now, where we just withdrew $225,000. So that is the ask here, and I'll get to the impacts in a minute when we look at a different slide. Any questions on that warrant and why we're asking for $225,000? To give you some perspective, if you look at the last financial The special education trust before we withdrew the 225 a few weeks ago was at 271. So it's down into the 40,000 range. I'm going to move my slide, and if you guys think of a question, let me know. Okay, the maintenance trust. So this is another warrant article for the CIP or the maintenance trust. The amount being requested is $425,000. The short of it here is if you took our 10-year CIP and all of the costs in that, divided by 10, what would be the need would be $425,000. So we've talked about this and how do we get to that amount? So last year we asked for $350,000. $150,000 of it came from taxation. The other $200,000 came from fund balance. It's always very easy to raise money when you're using fund balance. So 150 was the number that came from taxation. This is meant to just sort of, this is right from the CIP for the current year. So the starting balance is $348,000 over on the right. If you were to add in that appropriation of 425, so slide that over and add 348, and now we're going to start subtracting. And we're not quite sure why the bond payment is here, but for some reason, the bond payment, which has nothing to do with the CIP, the performance contract does. But if you want to know what the bond payment is, that's what it is for the coming year, $577,000. So the performance contract, which is with Siemens, that was done a number of years ago for lights and some energy cost savings at the middle high school. I'm assuming at Harold Martin School, that was when I was teaching, not when I was on the board. That is $42,792. There is a need for some kitchen appliance replacements at Maple Street, $12,000. Classroom and cafeteria furnishing, $30,000. We have a boiler situation at Maple Street School, which is going to need immediate attention. It was believed that was, budgeted for $294. The real cost of that will be $359. That has not happened yet. So when you take that and subtract those elements, you see that our remaining balance would be $329,458. We would have spent $443,000 in this year. So that's sort of like how it works. I was reminded earlier today that this is a living document. So things that were once really important might get moved down the chain when the boiler in one of your elementary schools needs replacement. So something else is going to get deprioritized. I don't think that's a word. And something else is going to be elevated. The tricky part about this, and it comes up later, but I'm going to do it now, is we're asking for 425. The impact on taxes is not 425. It is 275. This is where we get into, last year we asked for 150. That's already there, right? That's in the tax rate now. We're asking for 425, but the increase, the delta, is 275. That would be the impact to the tax rate. If we're going to slay the CIP dragon, we need to gradually increase the amount that we're asking for through taxation, embed it into our tax rate so that we're there and we're doing this 425 every year. And my simple thought to this statement is, it is far better to pay ourselves through this warrant process than to get in the scenario where we need to bond it and have to pay interest on that. We can pay ourselves with no interest, or we can bond something in the future because we've let things or have not been able to afford them and had to pay interest. I mean, that's kind of how I look at the CIP scenario. Whether or not this progression is slow enough for people, that is something for the budget committee to consider and for taxpayers to consider. But 425 is what's needed.
Okay, sorry, you confused me. So
Okay.
are you actually raising, are the taxpayers this year funding 425 or the two number that you asked?
The taxpayers would be funding 425. The increase to the tax rate because of that is 275, because the 150 is already in the tax rate from last year. I know. I did the same thing for years.
And there's no money coming from funds. So it
I
has,
don't know. I'm still lost. Somebody else help me.
so last year, 150 came from taxes
Yeah,
and the rest came from funds,
Fund balance.
okay,
fund balances.
sure.
So no, there's no fund balances, so the net is 275 from taxes.
Okay, I get that, but why does it say amount to be raised 425?
So
That's the way he has to say it.
yeah, we're still raising the 425.
Okay,
Last year we raised 150.
yeah,
So that amount is in our current tax rate.
sure.
If nothing were to change, that amount is still in our current tax rate.
Okay,
So now we're going to ask for $425,000, but you already have the 150 in your tax rate. So the only change to the tax rate is the 275.
okay.
I'll work on it. I wasn't a math teacher, so I know we'll come back to this again. It is the whole concept of the change in the Delta piece when I first went on the finance committee was like, say what again? Economics is not accounting or finance.
The taxpayers to approve that much being in the fund, which is fine. But like, you're not actually raising 425 this, or you're not like. Okay, oh,
You are raising 425. The increase in your taxes is not based on $425,000. It is based on $275,000.
I will consult
Okay,
afterwards to
Okay.
figure out what I'm missing.
and we will do a better job of communicating that.
Understood.
At all possible, try to make that make sense the first time around. 'Cause
Yep.
you're gonna have 300-400 people asking the same whirling question.
I think, so when we do the all impact warrants, I'll try again. Okay?
Just think, Rob, I appreciate for the budget committee sort of setting the context that 200 of it came from fund balance last year. I'm just not sure that helps overall.
Hmm.
Because if it comes from fund balance, it still was taxpayer money. At the end of the day, we still basically said we're going to put 375,000 last year
Correct.
into the maintenance trust. A little bit of it came from new taxes, most of it came from old taxes. I think that sort of confuses the issue to the general public. I would just stick with, it was 375 last year. This year it's 425, personally.
Fair enough.
I apologize, I never really understood capital improvement plans. Is this list, the boiler, the north roof? Is this,
I'm sorry, Vicky. Can you guys, I'm having a hard time hearing her because I'm hearing you. So, thank you.
are these projects slated for the upcoming school year?
That's correct. This is 25-26. This is what would be on the docket for next year.
So what is the difference between, for instance, the kitchen appliance not having a figure in the left and then 12,000 in the right? Is that because it came up after an initial round of budgeting?
I think it's because it got pushed over to the right so the things on the left are things that are scheduled to be done. If you move to the right, it's things that we're now saying, those are the priorities. Those have to be done.
Ah. Okay, understood.
I would make that clear too in the presentation, like the left is a wish list and the right is what we're actually doing. I inferred that, but it
Yeah.
would just be easier to read.
Okay.
So the Maple Street School boiler, am I to understand that we're switching from oil to propane?
That's my understanding, yes.
Pulling the oil tanks out from under the ground,
Correct.
and are the propane tanks going underground?
Don't know.
No, come on, that should have been an easy one.
Probably have a facilities director, I'm not sure. And I'm not on the CIP committee, so
Is propane less money?
I would assume that was the reason that it's more cost efficient to do that between the cost of the burner and the cost of the fuel. That would be my guess.
Good, because I thought we were going to wood pellets because those saved even more money.
Pellets is, I mean, there's, they sort of subsidize each other in that building, so they both work together.
Thank you.
Can you help me understand the paving, seal coating and parking lot repair in the operating budget as compared with paving and parking lot maintenance in the CIP?
So I think that is a difference in terms of what's immediately going to happen if it's in the budget, right? And if it's in the CIP, it's a wish list of what we think should happen.
Okay,
If it's in the budget, it's going to happen out of the budget. And if it's in the facilities budget and occurring. If it's in the CIP, we need to have saved the money in order for it to happen. But it's work that needs to be done.
That would be above and beyond what's in the operating budget.
Correct.
That was, if
Correct.
CIP money was used for what's shown here.
Yes.
Rob, the performance contract amount, the 42,000, that a set amount for the next 9 years?
That is a set amount, and whether or not it changes with interest, I'm not quite sure, but yeah, so it's essentially like a bond. And that was agreed to, what are we in year 7 of 16, so we'll go back a few cycles for that one. Great. The tech trust, we ask here to add to the technology trust, which again is currently sitting at, my cheat sheet here is $26,000 in it and change. It's for $30,000. Support student device replacement, network and Wi-Fi upgrades. So that's our Chromebooks, one-to-one educational services, servers, switches, Wi-Fi. These are big ticket items. If it could be put into the operating budget, but these are things that are longer term. So it's sort of like a CIP for technology, if you will. The next one, I'm going to skip right over this one because this is in draft form. We had a long discussion about our maintenance vehicle last night. We will know after our next board meeting whether we're going to be asking for more money for the vehicle trust and how much that will be based on the decision we make about whether or not we're going to buy a new used vehicle to replace that. So we had a very robust, almost green bag like conversation last night at our board meeting.
You don't want to go there.
Yeah, it wasn't as good as green bag and didn't have the duration, but it certainly had some of the similar trappings. A little levity at this point in the night is a good thing, Ken. Okay, tax impact all warrants. So you've got the budget, the operating budget on the top. So the increase 748,536, 53.7. It's rounded up to 54 there. The HEA contract, an increase of 455,365 for 32.6 cents. I've got the next 10th here. The Teamsters, 38,492 for 2.8 cents. The CIP, and I'm going to try again. So last year we asked for 350. This year we're asking for 425. The increase on taxes will be 275. Okay. It's only going to cost you 270. I shouldn't say the word only when we're talking about $275,000. Sorry, I take that back. The increase to taxes will be 275,000 or 20 cents on the tax rate. The special ed trust at 225 would be 17 cents. That is also rounded up. And then the technology at 30,000 would be 3 cents. Ignore the vehicle trust one for now, because last year we asked for 20, and this year we were only going to ask for 10, so that would see a decrease. Don't want to confuse that issue. We're just going to leave that one blank. So the total impact of everything all together, approximately $1.27 on the tax side. On the expense side, the percentage increase, 5.73%, all in over last year's costs. Last year, we were at 27,256, 462, all in. This year at 28,808, 855, for a 1.762393 increase.
So the increase in the tax rate is about 6.5%.
I didn't do that way, Ken. I don't have that number in front of my head. If we want to look at, well, we can do it per household on the next page, but I don't have that math in my head right now, Ken.
Isn't it a little funky anyway because of the reval? No? Okay.
Any question on this one? And when it comes all down to it, myself included, when we get to school district meeting, this is the slide people tend to focus on or want to think about in their own heads. So this is the cost of what each item would be based on home assessed value. So if we're just going to work on, I'll just pick what maybe is a median price home in Hopkinton now at 500,000. I don't know. Is that about right, Neil? So $268 increase in your taxes, the HEA contract, $163, Teamsters, $13.80, the CIP, $98.59, special ed trust, $80.50, and $11, well, that's the tech, yes. And then the vehicle trust, again, ignore that for now. So the total tax impact on that house would be about $630. Use of revenue, and I have to apologize to my friend Don Houston because we still don't, and I know Don's working on his across the two budgets sheet. So the school board is settled in on using $400,000 from Article 10, which is currently at $866,677. We have not settled in on a fund balance number to use as revenue. As I stated earlier, we're currently at about 186,000. Last year we were at 508, and let's just say the waters are still a little bit murky for us to decide what that number should be and what we should commit to. We may be all a little gun shy because of special ed costs, but that picture will get clearer as we move on.
Rob, you earlier, I think, I didn't write it down, but said that the fund balance, current fund balance projection was like
186, well, right now it's 186,000.
186,000. And does that reflect, you were also talking about how we're upside down on special ed this year to the tune of 500?
600 and something was the short math on the big numbers, but it gets almost to 700,000. Yes.
But then we're covering a portion of that with the withdrawal from the special education
Correct.
trust fund.
Yes.
So the one, sorry, not writing the numbers down. The fund balance projection reflects covering all the known costs.
Correct.
Including the additional special ed costs that we didn't have in the budget.
I'm gonna defer to the business administrator on that, but I believe yes is the answer. The fund balance reflects all of our current scenarios, expenses, expected revenues, et cetera.
So,
Yes.
After the reevaluation, what would be the max that we can hold for Article 10?
It's a percentage of the net of the amount raised. So it's 5% of our net appropriation, which I think is was 17 million. I don't know exactly where that number is going to fall. So it's probably going to raise up a little bit, but it doesn't really have anything to do with valuation, and it has to do with our net appropriation, I believe, locally raised. Getting either quiet or tired. I'm not quite sure which, but does anybody have any other questions? I would, well, I guess, if you have other suggestions for changes to the presentation as we move forward, we certainly got some good feedback on some of the things, so let me know, we can do that. And it's up to you there, Miss.
Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it and appreciate all the work that went into preparing these materials. They were definitely detailed and thorough, and especially on the special ed and the contracts. I appreciate the kind of preemptive expectation of the questions that can come and the materials being put together. I think I speak on behalf of the committee in saying that.
Yes,
Thank you.
fantastic.
I would really like to thank our superintendent, our board chair, business administrator, all of the people that work in the various departments for doing all of that work. And I think that, over the course of being on the board, it's been very clear that we want to communicate as well as we can, what is happening, why it's happening, as best we can. So I hope we've done a better job of that this year, and we'll keep trying to do it.
Great.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Rob, sorry. Before I open it up to public comment, is there any discussion that the board wants to have or comment from board members? I know we asked questions along the way, but. Do you want to chat about your sheet tonight, Don?
I think because I didn't get the information quite quick enough
Okay.
to get it in.
Okay,
I don't want to put out anything that's not correct.
I appreciate that. I agree. So I will just state then that the board is working on sort of or Don is working on a sheet that would look at the impacts of the tax rate from the town, the precincts and the school together, and just kind of a quick snapshot. It's not ready tonight, but that is something that I think was requested last year. That is obviously of the purview of this committee. And so that's kind of in progress, not ready to share yet. Okay, with that. Did you have anything to say, Charlie, before I open up? Okay.
I guess I just have one question. Do we have any handle on what's going to happen to enrollment after 2025, 2026? Because, my town report from last year stops there, and I didn't know if we had a handle on what's going to happen maybe next year or the year before. Yeah. Yeah, because it goes out 2 years on the town report.
I don't know, I can talk to Mike about that. I don't know, from a personal perspective, I think the projections have not always, we all remember, we were spending some time there talking about one elementary school, and that went up in smoke, so, but I will ask to see what that's happening.
I just like to get a handle on that before we start hiring more employees,
Well, remember, what is in front of you is what
Yeah.
we're hiring for our current need. We're not talking about hiring for 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, I'll open it to public comment. Whoever wants to come up, we have a
Okay.
chair. 1 second. Do we I don't know. Well, yeah. Thanks, Neil. It's just the mic is you have to
Well, for
Anyway.
somebody like me.
So.
I got a bad boot, sorry.
Before you start, just a reminder, state your name and address for the record. And I would also just a friendly reminder to everyone that I think there's a presumption everyone is coming here with the best of intentions for the town and our community. And so let's keep all the dialogue respectful and not targeted. Sound good?
This is
Cool.
Michael Foley, 54 Willoughby Road, Forest Hopkinton. Let's get some background. My profession is a pharmacist. Everything I deal with is milligram per kilogram. I was a professional consultant for over 40 years doing labor benchmarking in healthcare facilities. Rob used the term benchmarking. Your definition of benchmarking and mine are completely different. When I look at benchmarks, you want to compare a number with a volume indicator. In this case, your slides that talk about number of employees for salary wages should have been paid hours, including part-time individuals, divided by salary wages. So anything to do with labor should have been a dollar amount compared to the number of employees or hours, worked hours. Any of your metrics that you had about decreasing staff, but comparing numbers of salary or a dollar amount to a dollar amount doesn't give you the full picture of you added people, you took away people, but metrics could have been built to show why the trends are the way they are. That's one. So overall, on the budget committee, I would suggest, and this was suggested with the previous superintendent over 10 years ago, to move to a metric-based benchmarking where you're looking at a cost and a volume indicator and look at it over years. Now, that may not be helpful for the first year, but at least as your class sizes decreases and the number of students, the number use of part-time employees versus full-time may have been number of employees, but it's labeled full-time people. I don't know. Then you would also build in contract hours. Yeah.
Full-time equivalent.
Full-time equivalents. Number two, I don't understand that. Where's the mandate that a teacher has to have 4 units per 8-hour workday? And the fact that you're going and taking a 1.2 unit out of a one individual and you're paying them more when they're a teacher. I just don't know where that metric came from as a school board. Number three.
Can I answer that question?
Okay.
I don't know if we're doing that, but.
No, you don't have to answer them. Just summarize it at some point. Be prepared because these are the kind of things that are going to come up. Number three, I see in the article that we have a middle school, Hopkinton Middle School hockey team. Is that a club team or are we paying for that team?
We have, okay, so let me,
What's that?
Field or ice?
Ice hockey. The photograph was in the Hopkinton Community News and I see a team photo of 3 goalies totally equipped with pad, equipment, skates, uniforms. Is that a club or is the school district paying for that team? Because I've been in this town for 40 years. I ran HISA for 6. I never knew that this town had a middle school hockey team. Then you add the transportation of that team. How do they get to the play hockey? Does our team bus take them there? So there's a lot of questions that I saw tonight of the numbers. I don't think you did the basis of us going back and saying, I need to put it into a metric system to identify how the volume and the cost and the labor hours and salary wages compare on a unit by unit basis. And that's all.
Okay.
But maybe you'll consider it. Thank you.
Do you want to respond, Rob?
just in the matter of, whether a teacher gets paid for an extra fifth, that is a contractual obligation. Their contract is based on teaching a certain number of classes. And if they go beyond that, then they should be compensated for what goes beyond that. That is in the contract.
Has that changed in the new contract?
That has been the same that my entire time of living in Hopkinton for the last 26 years, 27 years.
Well, I haven't been retired for 26 years, but bad news is for the town is I am now retired and I have time to look at all these things.
Thank you. All right, just because no one's like at the chair yet, so there's a hand raised online. Does our Samsung participant want to go ahead and chime in and then we'll come back to the in-person? Is that okay? Okay.
No.
Okay, Samsung, go for it. You need to unmute. All right, I think their hand is down. So, Samsung, okay, there we are.
Am I there?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Carrie Williams. I live at 260 Kearsarge Ave in Hopkinton. And I grew up here and went into this school district, so I've grown up here. So just so you know who I am. So I've listened to the entire meeting, and some of the feedback that I have, because we've had such a separation in town, is that there was a lot of I'm not sures. I don't have that number in front of me. I'm not positive about that because I know in recent meetings, we've had the administrator and the business administrator there to give some of this feedback, because I know there's a lot of concerns in town as far as how the money is being spent. So I don't disagree with the gentleman that just came on previously, saying that, where are we coming up with the number? Like, what does that number look like? How are we coming up with the contractual amounts? Why are we offering health insurance or any of these other insurances as part of our teacher packages? Because I own two businesses. So I let people come to me because we are a very, very attractive district to be in because your children get to go here. So I've had 4 boys go through this school. My 2 are now graduating this year. So I'm just saying I do appreciate and 100% support my district. I support all of the volunteerism that goes on here. It's just I feel like maybe a little bit more of an expansive communication would be helpful for you to be achieving the goals you're trying to get to.
Thank you. Would you like to?
Sure. I'm Frances Blaney, 124 Bassett Mill Road in Hopkinton. And I have a couple questions. I know that the FTE are not all teachers, but when you take out the district and you divide the number of students by the number of FTEs, you get 4.77 students per FTE for the elementary school. And then you get 4.94 for Maple Street, 4.93 for the middle school, and 6.61 for the high school. You also get, when you divide the numbers overall, over 28,000 per student that is being spent. And that's very much higher than the state average. So these are the kinds of numbers that I think the average person looks at and says, how can we be justifying that we've got a 5-to-1 teacher, assistant, whatever title ratio, and how can we justify $28,000 per student, over 28,000, particularly when, unfortunately, we're not actually getting some of the results we might want in terms of test scores and college admissions. So those are the kinds of things I would appreciate more information so that I would understand if my tax dollars are being spent appropriately.
Thank you. Do you want to respond?
Sure. So I can appreciate the mathematics or the equation there. I can also, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about student ratios of 5-to-1 by including all your staff. Never heard that in my life. How many students are in front of a teacher in 2024 when many of those students may require supports? You have administration, you have custodians. There's a whole valley of things. So I get it in terms of, a way to look at it. I think it makes it look terrible when it's not terrible. In terms of our results as a school district, I will stand firm that this is one of the best school districts in the state of New Hampshire, with 85 to 90% of our kids going off to the colleges of their choice or to the military. When we looked at the reading and math scores last year at the elementary schools, as my wife would remind me, there were lots of green trees. Green trees means kids performing above or at the level that we would like them to be. So I take great umbrage that we are underperforming as a school district.
Can we comment on that or? No. No? Okay, no.
Go ahead.
David Feller, 881 Clement Hill Road, Kentucky, New Hampshire. Anybody here know what I'm going to talk about? Yes. But first, I want to talk about the performance contract on the building. That is set up as an incentive for labor, or excuse me, for energy savings. Is that correct?
That is correct. That was the plan when it was put in place, that I understand it.
Okay, and the energy savings are incorporated in the operating budgets? So the reduction or the less cost that we're paying is in the operating budgets. Why isn't the performance contract in those operating budgets?
It's a good question, Dave. I think at the time, for some reason, it was placed in the CIP and that's where it lives. So it was probably an inappropriate place for it to live. But for whatever reason, 8 years ago, somebody decided that that was a good idea.
I would suggest that the school board and budget committee consider next year taking any recurring expenses like that and putting them back into the operating budgets, because I think it's much more transparent to the people that are reading the details of how those numbers are come up by. When you look at the capital improvement plan, you kind of look at just what you were looking at. You look at the 425 and you talk about 425. Is it 425 or is it 275? And you don't look at where it is, where those numbers are actually captured. So that's just one comment. So more importantly to me anyway is the insurance contracts last year and the year before and the year before, and I think maybe the year before and the year before. I've had pretty much the same comments, and I see in this year's proposed HEA contract, the same basic wording is going to be in the contract, which spells out these specific plans that are mandated, which means there's no negotiation at all. There's no options at all. And if the insurer wants to bring the plans, increase the rates by 20%, we have 2 years from now, we have absolutely no control over that. And I've been fighting for, please consider or substantial equivalent the contract, and that keeps getting for one reason negotiated out or not considered. And I seriously, we're not. And the other thing is I hear except in the contract year, the next 2 years, the board states something of the effect that we have no control over these costs because they're in the contract. Well, you do have control over those in the contract when the contract's up. So that's one thing. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to remind you that in the year 2 of the HEA contract, there is the opportunity to reopen discussions on that. So that is, I want to give you kudos because that was in my head because you were in my head for doing that. That was, I would call it the Dave Feller clause, actually. And just, I've heard that situation and that's part of the reason why that's there.
Well, I appreciate that. And hopefully everybody appreciates that. The other thing that I'd like to know, and I don't want to go into it now, but at some point maybe I could learn a little more about what the actual rates are for the different plans as compared to the average salary. And I know that that's difficult, but if we just, what I think I heard was that in the first year, the percentage increase is higher to offset the increase in the copay. Okay. And what I want to do in my mind is relate that to dollars. So if you say that it's a percent more, I'm making numbers up now. It's a percent more on $100,000 salary. Okay, that's $1,000. But if the 2% is only on $2,000, that's only $40. I'm totally making numbers up. So it sounds like, yes, this is a good idea, but the dollars make no sense. And I want to make sense in my head. So if somebody could get that, get those rates to me, that would be great. Thank you for listening to me again.
Thank you, Dave.
Good evening, Lauren Clement, 86 Maple Street. Follow up, I guess, on Mr. Fuller's. And I pulled up budget sheets because of the performance contract and something that Ken had said earlier, asking about the performance contract. I'm guessing you guys don't have your budgets in front of you anymore. They might be tucked away, but under the facilities department, under budget unit 126-20-335, department-wide maintenance, and then account number 735, it shows replace equipment. And then under the budget justification, it shows for, I believe it says calendar year, 128,000, and it says in the notes, performance contract, and in parentheses, 2017 municipal lease. And I believe when I asked on this several years ago, when that performance contract was made, the only way they could do it was to put some of that funding in the operating budget and some in the CIP. And I may be incorrect on this, but it's showing under this line item for proposed for 25-26, 128,000 in the operating budget. So my understanding was that it is in the operating budget annually, as well as a third of it or another portion in the CIP. So it's a little bit larger than what we're thinking. So that's a lot of funding to be saving on some LED lights, but that's what was done. Moving on, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if you want to stop on that or have any discussion, but I do have a couple other
My
things.
understanding is it does live in both places. You're correct.
Okay, yeah, I thought Michelle said there was some 2/3 ratio there. I do recall that explanation, and I happen to have the budget sheet, so that's why I busted that out. On the overall presentation under staffing budget changes, the reduction of the ABA position is pretty straightforward. The addition of the English teacher, understand the reasoning. It says 119,242. It does not clarify if that includes benefits or if that's straight up salary. But if we're hiring new practices to hire low, I don't know if that's a low number, if that's just salary. And then the same applies for the two IAs at 133,000, whether that's an IA coming in and maybe picking a family plan and you had to budget according to that, but having a wife that
It's definitely salary and benefits.
is okay. Okay. So thank you for the clarification on that. And then lastly, back to Mr. Houston's conversation about class sizes and trying to find the class size. I think it was on page 8. Sorry. Is it on page 8?
It's on the second page of this handout.
Okay, thank you. So my understanding, and again, I can be corrected if I'm wrong here. When the assistant business administrator position was proposed last year, there was supposed to be a projected 100,000 used from anticipation of not hiring a third grade teacher. And my understanding is in the spring, a bunch of staff got shuffled around and then that third grade teacher was hired. And I've never had an understanding of why that happened. especially after we put in our class size policy that stated that we needed to get to 21 students before we added that next teacher. And I don't believe that class size currently is over 63. I do understand that 20 kids in the classroom is a lot of kids. But when you look at the projections going several years out, as Rich spoke to this, they go down, and you were talking about trying to transfer potential staff to shuffle them over. So I've never gotten clarification on there, and I wonder if you guys would get an answer for that. Those are my comments.
Thanks, Lauren.
You're welcome.
Do you want to address that, Rob, or? Okay.
To be
Feel free
honest-
to say no.
Yeah, I'm not really clear on what the specific question is or the dynamics. So Lauren, I think we'd probably be best to take that off mic so we could have a little bit more clarity with what you're asking.
I think I know what he's asking. I think he's saying, why hire a fourth, third grade teacher based on the class size policy?
It's my understanding. Am I correct?
Okay. Mr. Flynn, would you want to address that here quickly, or feel free to say no? Okay. My feedback would be, let's anticipate the question. Like, I think from this committee, I vaguely also remember the conversation about like not hiring a fourth grade teacher. So.
Second grade.
Okay. Understood. Okay.
Now, I'm confused on what he's actually asking. I don't know what his timeline is versus what the enrollment was at the time. So there was a reduction. There's only 3 seconds.
Understood. Okay. We don't have to get into it here, as you say, but it may come back around, I would guess. It's just feedback taken.
So these numbers are next year's numbers, if you look at them. So grade 5 at 77 is this year's grade 4.
Okay.
So if you're thinking about class size number, you're thinking of 77, not. And it's 4 right here. We do all the grades back.
Got it.
Lauren's
Yeah.
talking about the third grade, this year's third grade.
I think if I can just a point of order, we're talking about next year's budget, not what happened this year or last year. I
Yeah,
appreciate the
sure, I
question
get
and we'll meet it out and do that. But we're talking about what's going to happen for this budget for next year's cycle.
Yeah, I think there's a few things going on. So let's just end it, or not end it, but like, let's just take an action item on this. I think the budget committee is also an accountability committee. I believe that a few folks remember a discussion about a reduction in a teacher relative to the ABA position. And whether or not memories are exactly accurate or interpretations were correct on which grade that was, there's feedback to kind of circle back on, hey, what happened with that? Is that
Fair.
fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Amy Bogart, 146 Deer Path, Kentucky. I'm a nuts and bolts person. And I don't know if these things have been addressed in the past. But I'm wondering, are we still doing paper? You still printing stuff? Like papers for the kids and such? We're not in the cloud yet?
Some teachers are printing paper, yes.
Our phones, the phone system for the school, is it landline or cloud?
I do not know.
My company saved a lot of money going to the cloud.
Yeah.
We have 7 locations. The facility budget changes. Did we go out to bid?
Excuse me?
Did we go out to bid?
Anything over a certain amount of money goes out to bid.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, and we didn't take the lowest? Which one did we take?
What specifically are we talking about?
Sometimes when a bid, you'll get 6. Sometimes they'll take the lowest bid, sometimes the middle or the top.
What are you asking about the bid for?
For the paving and the CIP.
Oh, and that is something that is projected to be done, not something that has been done, so it would go out to bid.
Okay, all right. About the athletic trainer. Isn't that Mr. Meserve's job? Doesn't he help the kids when there's an issue, they get hurt?
Mr. Meserve is not an athletic trainer. He's an athletic director. He is not certified to do that. Having been a coach, all of us do things that because you need to do them. It's not necessarily the right thing to do them. I just want to remind everybody, the athletic trainer is not in the budget. But
Okay. All right,
yes,
I just
but, yeah,
want a
fair enough.
clarification. All right, now the thing about the proposed, if everything passes for the school, it's another 260. My house is just reappraised. And at my house, my taxes went up $1,700. Okay, now we want to add, and then there's the town, I'll be paying almost $5,000 for a double wide. I do not own my land. It's an issue for a lot of us in this town. It's a huge hit. And adding on another $300. I don't have a kid in the school. We're not on water. And I only have 6 bags of trash a month. So it's just it's hard to live here. And I want to point that out. There's a lot of people in my boat. There's a lot of folks here. So that's it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Arnold Coda, 400 Gould Hill Road. In no particular order, just some of my questions and then some comments as well. You listed all of the tax rate increases for the various categories here. They come to $1.29. Do we still have a Hess contract?
Yes,
Well, that would have a tax impact this year too, would it not?
that is already in the budget. That is in the operating budget as part of salaries.
Oh, all right. Okay, thank you. I did not hear the answer to the question regarding why is paving in both the CIP presentation as well as in the operating budget? What was the answer to that?
So in the operating budget is a specific task that would be done. In the CIP is the broader sense that we have 3 facilities with lots of pavement that will need to be taken care of. So one is an immediate need that lived in the budget. One is a forecasted need that lives in the CIP.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Rob, would it be fair to say that in the budget is like fixes and in the CIP is like broader repaving or bigger level?
Yes.
Okay.
And something that's coming in the future beyond this budget for next year. Okay.
The CIP is a planning tool, forecasting tool.
Okay, thank you. And then let me see, it is page, well, I'm not quite sure if it's page 8 or 7 or what, but in any event, projected enrollment that is used for budgeting. I understand the information that's presented, but if we look at, or not, but nevertheless, when we look at Harold Martin with no increase projected, and then we go through Maple Street and the middle and high school, is it safe to assume, therefore, that if we look ahead beyond this projection for this coming budget year, that the enrollment in Maple Street should go down even more because there was 0 in Harold Martin? And then therefore, since Maple Street
ultimately, it seems, would be pushing fewer students up into the middle school. Would that middle school, never mind the high school, the middle school enrollment projection fall as well? Are those safe assumptions to make?
So here, I'm going to say two things. So one, yes, right? Like if all things being equal, then there are no changes that are in the universe. I guess you could make that projection. In the short time that I've been on the board and the longer time period that I've been a taxpayer and listening to people talk about projections in school enrollment beyond a year, I don't put much stock in any of that. So like you know, as I was saying to Rich, it's like we're dealing with what we know for next year, and to project beyond that, like we can have that conversation and what it might mean, but what will it mean? I don't know, and yeah, I guess yeah.
Okay, that's why I use the word assumption. And another question relative to the projection for Harold Martin with no enrollment increase. Do you know if this includes any numbers from the child find program or requirement?
I would assume that it does. That's a legal obligation. So I would assume that, yes, that is.
Oh, I know it's a legal obligation. I just need to know whether or not that has already been included in here, if those numbers are yet to appear.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if they're in this projection, yes, we've met our legal obligation and they are in there.
Okay, thank you. And then on, I think, this part of my comment here, and this is purely interest. You're yanking out the oil-fired heating system in Maple Street School and replacing it with a propane-fired system. Is that correct?
My understanding.
Okay. Recently, that is within the last 3 or 4 years, we also, my wife and I also replaced our heating system at home. It was an oil-fired system, still is, as a matter of fact. And we looked at higher efficiency systems fired both by oil and by propane. And one of the things, we got 3 bids. And one of the things that every one of the bidders told us is that in our decision-making, we need to be aware that per gallon, BTU, propane provides fewer BTUs per gallon than fuel oil does. So hence my question here, are we really going to be saving any money, assuming we still want to heat that building to the same levels as we've been heating it? I don't think I really need an answer or want an answer to that. I just found it curious, given what Alice and I had found out when we were examining what to do with our heating system as well. All right. I really appreciate what the district has done in providing the information for special education. Both the kids that are on IEPs and the kids that are on Section 504, because those are some of the questions that I had for tonight, and now I don't need to ask those questions. So I really do appreciate that. I would like to know, though, with respect to not so much the kids on 504, but for kids who have IEPs, I know this information that's presented, and I do not doubt it. What has been the increase over the past 1 to 3 years in the number of kids that are needing IEP special education?
It's been pretty stable.
Okay, thank you. All right.
And by stable, I mean like 1% in one direction or the
A
other.
few years ago, it was 18%, so it's gone up a little bit.
Was what?
18% about 5 years ago.
Well, I remember at one point prior to our current superintendent being here, that we had 13% of our kids who were eligible for and receiving IEP services. So it struck me that at 18%, we had really jumped, and I was curious to know why. And I think I know enough about what has been happening across the board nationwide with respect to the need for special education services. So I don't need to pursue that any further. Let me see. With respect to teachers who retire, Rob, do you know if there are any teachers who have applied for early retirement in the 25-26 school year? Because they need to give advance notice.
Not in this school year. Right now.
Right.
We have 3 people who have applied for early retirement. That was talked about at our school board meeting last night.
And they're retiring at the end of this current school year. Yeah, I'm looking ahead to the next one.
We don't accept, well, they don't need to do that until the fall. So we don't know that.
Oh, I thought it was a longer notice period.
No, the notice period happens in the fall of the year that you want to retire. That is actually, thank you for asking that question, because it brings up a change in the contract as well. For budgeting purposes, I bring it up because it is language and it's not something the voters would be voting on. But in the current contract, the point at which teachers were required to let us know was March 1st, which made budgeting very difficult. We have changed that to January 15th, so we have a much clearer picture of what that is for budgeting purposes.
Okay, thank you. And we're still pertaining to early retiring teachers. Could you tell us what then, with respect to salaries and whatever else you may offer to teachers who are coming in to replace somebody who retires, is there a salary savings on that? Do we look for teachers who have maybe less experience, if you will?
Absolutely. I mean, the whole goal of the early retirement incentive is Rob Nato leaves with however many years of experience. And you hire somebody who's coming in at, BA 5 or less, or MA 5 or 7 or less, and you have savings there. That is the goal. And, in past years, we have shown what those savings are, generally speaking, about $150,000 a year on new hires, the balance between people retiring and the people that replace them.
Thank you. One thing I do need to say is you used yourself as an example. When Bob retires and they replace him, you are irreplaceable. So
very kind.
I needed to put that on the record. Again, out of curiosity, on whatever, well, it says page 24, maybe it isn't, but in any event, HEA contract shows the contract covers 103 employees. But when I look back on another page, which I may not be able to find right now, it says that there are 85 people, and I cannot find it.
And you're correct, Donald. So I'll just clarify that. So there are 85 people in the bargaining unit that are members of the Hopkinton Education Association. Not all teachers are in the association, but they are still covered by the contract. So we employ 103 teachers. There are 85 teachers in the bargaining unit.
Okay, thank you. All right. And in the line of a bit of information that perhaps we need to be aware of, I left it on the chair. Thank you. A couple of years ago, in the comments I made here before this committee, I suggested that something that would be useful for the committee would be to contact a particular guy at the Carsey School at the University of New Hampshire to gain or collect demographic information about Hopkinton. And the response I got from a member of the committee was, well, anybody can go online and get that information. So for better or worse, I did go online to get that information. And so here, among the information I got, and this is accurate as of 2023. The median age in Hopkinton, New Hampshire is 47, and estimates of total population, et cetera, and tells us that 16.7% were under the age of 15, 16.24%, 15 to 29, et cetera. And then jumping ahead a little bit, 15% age 65 to 84, and 2.19% were 85 years of age and older. And those two figures still seem to be accurate, even though this stuff was as of 2023. And I found it interesting that in reality, we have for our residents who are 65 to 69 years of age, and it goes up. So let me just say 65 to 85 years and over, 17.25% of our population, citizens here, fall within that population range. And along with that, another piece of information that I pulled out, and this is as of 2024, only for Hopkinton. And these are gross figures. They are not broken down really by the ages that I just reported to you. The median household income as of June 24, $115,682. Median individual income, $53,014. Now, this is earned income only. It does not include retirement income, if we want to use the word income with retirement proceeds people may get. So it's only what people actually earn. And it's interesting because these are gross figures. They are before deductions for federal income tax and Social Security withholding. So well, we know for Social Security, it is 6-point-something%. I don't know if that's going up or not. Obviously, for income tax purposes, it's something else based upon whether the person is single, married, has kids, and all of that stuff. So my point is that while this sounds like a lot of money, and I think a lot of people would like to be making $115,000, $116,000, it may not really go very far with respect to tax payments in the town of Hopkinton. And we know.
Can I ask just for, out of respect for time, that we proceed quickly, Arnold?
Well, why am I being given a time limit?
Because you've spoken for a while now. I just want to be respectful of other folks now that we're, nearing a later hour. That's all.
Okay, and the reason
comments are appreciated as well as your research brought.
The reason I waited until now is because it appeared there wasn't anybody else who wanted to come to the table. I'm sorry?
You can take a few minutes.
Okay, excellent.
All right.
Thank you.
So in any event, we all know the situation with respect to funding special education. It doesn't matter whether it's the state or the feds. Neither one is providing the amount of special education that had once been not only provided, but promised to us as well. So in any event, based upon, well, it's not up there now, but the $1.29 per thousand increase for us on the recently reassessed value of our house means an additional $1,518 a year on top of just under by $150 or so, a $2,000 increase resulting from the reassessment. That means that for us, based upon things as they stand right now in Hopkinton, my wife and I draw Social Security of approximately the same amounts. Comes out to be right now, not including any of this increase, to 51% of either one of our net Social Security retirement payments. That's a lot of money for anybody to pay. for these other people who may be in this range of 65 to 89, probably 2.19% of those people are 89 or whatever. That's a lot of money for them. And so my point of this is that I find this this budget, all of its parts put together, really to put an onerous additional strain on the residents of Hopkinton. I think that you, in conjunction with the school board, however they wish to work it, you really need to find places where you might be able to trim the budget. Mike Foley asked about the hockey program. I remember back when that was started. I also remember when football was started, something that was discussed at annual meetings and nobody wanted them, but now we have them.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. I'm going to respond just to a couple of them, and then I'll let others respond. As far as I know, we don't have a school-funded middle school hockey program, so I don't know if it is a self-funded, and Mr. Flynn can chime in if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's not a school-funded middle school hockey program. Okay.
What's in the Susan Culver's?
Okay.
We have no middle school.
Maybe it was self-organized, who knows, but there we have it. There is not one. So just a point of clarification on that. Secondly, I just wanted to kind of just state that I cannot emphasize enough how much I agree with you that the fact that this state relies on a municipal funding system that puts a regressive punishment on its vulnerable and fixed income elderly population is kind of abhorrent to me. And so you're absolutely correct. And I wish, even if, there was a 0% increase in any of these budgets, that it is still a regressive system on our fixed income population, which feels very unfair morally to me personally. So I don't have an answer for you tonight, Arnold, but I just wanted to state that I agree with the general sentiment of that. Did anyone else want? I think I had one more thing to respond to, but I forget what it was in the course of the comments. So
One more
sorry for that.
clarification. I don't think we have a football program. We have jumped out of that.
They're not funded in the budget.
And we do not have one, period.
Oh, really?
I swear I had something else to say, but I've said a lot, so.
Okay, take your time. Tricia Lambert, 305 Galloping Hill Road. So I guess I just want to start at the top, just recognizing that with all the warrant articles in 25-26, it's 28.8 million with a 1.762 increase. I think last year was similar. So we're on this trend of 1.7, maybe 1.5. So you had made a good point that in the last meeting about what's going to happen in the next years. And I realize you're only voting on this, but I want to bring that to your attention. So if next year is going to be 1.7, at some point there's going to be a breaking point. So I guess the other thing is looking at the tax impact. We did have the reevaluation, which pushed a lot of the houses that were probably in the 400 range into the 800 range. So I think that should probably be reflected here for people to see, because now the range is much higher for people who were, when they probably bought it, which some 4 years ago were at 300,000 or 400,000, and now we're going to be paying that. Mr. Nato mentioned last night. Well, first, let me back up. When we were doing the reevaluation, it was discussed over and over again. It's just going to reset. It's not going to mean it's necessarily an increase. There is a threshold. I think it's 81%. Don't quote me on that. But it was mentioned last night that some of these people on these certain levels, that now it is the reevaluation that's causing hardship on these people. So which is it? So that's the first thing. It's confusing to the public.
I think, and maybe it's just a section of them. If you were at a $200,000 house and now suddenly the reevaluation is 400, I think that's what you meant at the time, but it's confusing. And so is it what Neil has said, it just resets it, which I believe it does to a point, or to not blame the school budget or any budget on that is confusing to people. So going back to the special ed, if I can clarify, I think you asked a question. I think I got it, but the question was, that I thought I heard was COVID somewhat of a driver in, and that was the uncomfortable question, and where we're at with special ed? I had two children, one with a 504 and one with an IEP. And I can tell you 100% on those people that affected them. And not so much beyond COVID, what we all had to experience, but it affected them and what the school did to them. And I didn't really understand how bad it was until I had to pull them out and get them out of that situation to where they were able to recover from that. So I even heard at a school board meeting, one of the principals mentioned that COVID has changed these children. And to say, to completely be blinded to this, that there was nothing happened to them during that period, and all the protocols and the isolation that was forced upon them, I think is, it's inhumane to say that to parents that watch them come home sick from wearing a mask. So now we're expected to pay for it. And we're being told it's because of this, it's because of that. Yes, there is a decrease from the state, but what is really going on here? And why are there so many kids with these issues? And I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people. So please take that into consideration, and that you're asking our public to pay for this now when my children were refused out of school. I'll leave it there. When looking at the budget, we talked about some of these programs that were, like hockey, maybe they weren't in there. I'd like you to consider any program, look back, it would be great to ask questions and looking back and how many programs were originally funded either through a foundation, through a grant or something else, ARPA funds, what was funded, and why is it now in the budget that we're expected to fund it going forward? And what are they? What are those programs? If there was something that was funded with a grant 2 years ago and now it's in this budget, we never talk about that. Those are soft things that we don't really know where that money is going. And so, we talk about teachers and contracts, and I can talk about that and whether I got a raise or who didn't get a raise. And I think there's a lot of money in here. And to Lauren's point, who's not here right now, when he talked about that teacher situation, we had asked for a very simple, like $250,000, and suddenly they needed that teacher. And then at the end of the year, we got $198,000 back. So suddenly it wasn't so important. So I question all of that. And I think the people need to know. Curriculum director. That was also something that was talked about at great length that we needed. And now we don't need it. So, and that was the excuse if people had a complaint about the curriculum that was there, what books they were reading, things like that. And they said, no, we're going to have a curriculum director. We went all through this. We spent, it looked like $134,000 to hire this person, which was after the meeting. And now suddenly we don't need that person and we got to move it over to special ed. I spoke about special ed. I get that. If I can just backtrack a bit, when I talked about all these other things that were funded previously, an example are Chromebooks. I believe that was funded with ARPA, some COVID money. And I know there was some discussion, it might be good to clear up on who's getting those, or pre-K getting them, or kindergarten getting them. I don't know what the answer is, but Chromebooks now are an expense going forward. If you bought them for every child and they didn't have it before, that is now an expense going forward. We're now forced to pay for. Does a kindergartner, first grade, third, where does it end? I don't know, but those are things to look at. I noticed the legal fees are going up. I don't know what they're for. Is that to fund the issue with the funding issue, or is it because there's right to know requests? I'm not sure, but it looks like there's a $10,000 increase to that. There were other items in there that people were upset about paying for people's retirement gifts and retirement parties. That should not be in there. I don't know how that ever even became a line item, but those things should be removed and should be asked about. I think that's it. I guess what I would say is to not send them back and to look for more money is not in the best interest of the taxpayers. To accept this as is, I understand the contracts, to accept this that is and not try to look for those soft targets is not in the best interest of the taxpayers. And so I would hope that this group, you asked a lot of great questions last time, and I appreciate that. You asked a lot of questions today. I appreciate that too. But I'm hoping that they get sent back to really sharpen the pencil so that people can still continue to live in this town. Thank you.
Before you get up, Rob, could you answer that question about the curriculum director? As I understand it.
Which question?
The question is, how come we need it? Now we don't need it. As I understand it, the emphasis was focused on Harold Martin and Maple Street to get that curriculum in line with the rest of what was going on.
There was also some alignment going on, because anytime you do a curriculum mapping in a K through 12 system, you want to make sure that what's happening below, sets an expectation of what's happening above. So this was a K through 12. The curriculum committee is a K through 12 committee with teachers from all three schools on it. The short answer to your question is, again, where is our greatest need? So, and, I remember, sometimes on this, I wear two hats, right? I represent the board and then I represent myself as a board member. The curriculum coordinator position came to be to deal with some of those issues of what are we using so that we don't have some teachers using one program in one grade level and others in another grade level, that there would be consistency. And there's one thing that I do know, having taught at the Landmark School for 6 years, consistency across a curriculum draws a lot of fruit, right? So that was the goal. So math curriculum, ELA, a lot of work has been done. We heard some good reviews from Amplify from a community member last night. It bears to mind that sometimes you have to make some hard choices. And this is one of those hard choices. Mr. Flynn strongly believes that a school district of our size, of any size, should have a curriculum coordinator. I'm wearing my Rob Nato hat, and I've already said this publicly many times, so I'm going to say it again. This was a short-term fix for me, right? You bring somebody in, but this may not be something that we can afford in the long term. So that's a difference of opinion between people on a board and the superintendent, fine. But the hard choice is, where is our greatest need? Is it in special ed or is it in an ongoing curriculum coordinator? The superintendent feels, and I agree, that greatest need right now is in the special ed situation. So the hard choice, can't have both, right? We can't afford both. This is what people have been asking us to do. We're doing it. So, yeah,
I guess, but to elongate on that, my understanding when I asked that question was that the focus was on a particular problem, and that has mainly been solved at this point. Now the priority has been switched to needing the other side. That's sort of why it happened.
That was not my understanding, and I've attended the meetings. We can have different opinions, but that wasn't my understanding, is that they needed a curriculum director, and there was a lot of other things of conversations behind the scenes on the need for it, and then it kind of popped up, and which kind of right after annual meeting, which I wasn't in, and why don't we vote on it type thing. So if I may, just finish with one real quick thing. Mm-hmm. So I guess the other thing, and I made this comment last night, is that we keep throwing money at things at this school district, and really nothing has changed. And if there was a change, it quickly gets pulled back. Curriculum director is a good example. The kids keep hearing the same things over and over again. And I can tell you from my experience is that competing with other options for school are becoming more and more apparent. And I know that the state And both the federal level is probably going to change here going forward. I can tell you my child, when I had to pull them out, my one child was able to do her senior year for under $1,000 at NHTI for 2 classes were free, the others were half price. And then that converted to going to first year in college to $8,000 worth of credit. So there are options out there that would really be great to change the conversation on how we're running this and what we're doing here. Because we keep throwing 1.7, everything is happening inside, not everything. Many things are happening inside those 4 walls, and we're not looking at other opportunities for these children. And I don't hear those conversations very often. And I really think that to keep throwing 1.7 now and then 1.7 next year, when we get to the 30 million, I mean, at what point are all your friends going to move out and you're going to have new people, and that's great, that can afford it, but you have lost your community that you probably have been here for many years. So I really encourage not only to send this back and to start looking at other options that are less expensive and that can provide opportunities for these children, for these students. And I didn't open my eyes until I was able to pull my kids out, and that's terrible. That's sad. This is my community too, and I want a good school. So it doesn't sound like that for me, but I do. I want a good school. And this is just heartbreaking. It's every year we come and we fight over these things, and I don't really want to fight over the money. I want to make sure that they have every opportunity that's good for any child that's different. And, you know, my kid had an IEP, sat in a class, great teachers. Your wife was wonderful, wonderful person. But you know what? It was the same thing every day. And now he's a beekeeper. So, anyway, thank you. You guys have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is sort of unrelated, but I'll just chime in. I remembered what I was going to say before. It would be, this is forward looking, just a comment to the school board. It would be super if next year if we have 3 retiring teachers and we anticipate there may be savings from hiring lower, which is our intended goal. If next year we are able to say, like, we did hire at a lower rate and here are the savings that accrued from
I
that.
brought that data to the budget committee before, and
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. So just an ask for next year.
yes. Maybe even this year.
Open chair.
Open
Open chair.
your chair.
It's a great chair. Hi, guys. Alyssa McCann, 519 Crowell Road. Okay. First, so I have questions, I have comments, and I have experiences. So we'll go on a quick journey together. I won't keep you too long, I promise. First, I just wanted to say I deeply appreciate so many of the questions I'm hearing, particularly the questions about programs that were previously funded and how they were funded and what has happened to that funding over time, and not from the viewpoint of necessarily wanting to cut them, but to seek alternative funding. And I know that it gets complicated when we start looking at other ways of funding things outside of the tax rate. But as a small business owner, if I found out the district needed something to support a program that aligned with my business's values, I would donate to the district to do so. I think that there's a lot of opportunity to look at what makes our school system great and holistic, and then say, how can we take that burden off of the taxpayer? And how can we ask folks who either have the skills, the time, or the resource to give back to the community that way? I think that everyone volunteering their time here right now to do this work, and imagine that if we could take the value of this time and apply it towards needed positions and clubs and everything else happening at the school, how much money that would actually save us. And I know that that's complicated. It's much easier to look at things in a dollar and cents and apply it to a tax rate and hire someone and be done with it, because managing volunteers and dealing with donations is its own. But I do think it's worthy to look at it to say, how are these things being funded, and can they be funded other ways? And can you get commitments from local businesses or other folks to continue that funding for a set period of time so you're not chasing it every year? So no, it's not the easiest thing to do. It could be great.
I've heard that the skate park needs to be renovated.
Good.
Sorry.
I'm also a skater myself, but I'm yeah, no, I'm someone sitting next to you who's involved with it is aware that I'm interested in giving money to that cause. One thing I hear us talking a lot about is we talk about money, and it's so hard to divorce it, but the experience I'm having is I keep hearing us talk about the impact. Like, what are we getting out of it? We're paying X for Y. And as someone who has a student in the pre-K program, who has an IEP, who's going to go through his entire experience at the district with an IA because of his medical diagnosis, I would like us to think about impact differently and think about the value of the student's time in the classroom differently. I grew up, college readiness was it, right? Like, I was going to go to college, that was going to be it. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. And I don't want that pressure to be on my child, and nor do I want, that's not his measurement of success. And so as we're talking about what we're getting out of this, I would love it if we could brainstorm some other benchmarks for determining what the value of our money is. Because I don't care what the state says our ranking is, and I don't care what the federal government says our ranking is. What I care is, does my son, when he graduates, look back and say, wow, I feel really great and ready for life now. I can do my taxes. I can like build something I need in my home. Like, I want him to be life ready. And I think every penny is worth that. So just naming that the focus on impact on college readiness, I would like to see us shift towards life and career readiness, whatever his career is going to be. And if college is the right path, cool, I'll support him. But like, maybe it's not, and that's cool too. And just because, again, I think it can feel very lonely when we talk about impact for our money through college readiness. Oh, I've heard it come up a couple times where we're like, okay, but have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? Has this been cut? And I know you don't need one more list or one more slide, and I'm sure it'll be confusing, but I do think it's always worth presenting, hey, by the way, here's all the stuff that we put on the cutting room floor. I think it is worth knowing that you guys have done all of that you did say we prioritized X over Y. And no, don't bake it into like your final thing, but as a separate thing to say the totality of what was asked was this. And we've already said no to all of that. And now we're down to like the final pieces, because I think it can help people conceptualize how far you've come and how much further there still is to go. Again, one more piece of work, so sorry about that. This is just a note on special education. I heard it come up about the question about the IEPs in pre-K, and you are correct that IEPs in pre-K are going to be a higher percentage. And the reason why is that you are not required to send your child to pre-K. However, in the state of New Hampshire, starting at 3 years old, the district is responsible for any and all service needs. So before the age of 3, the state covers it. And then after the age of 3, you have to switch from a community agency to a district. And so in any and all pre-K programs that are available to students through public education, you are going to see a higher percentage of IEPs. So just naming that, that's a thing. And then last, I did hear us talking a little bit about like Chromebooks versus paper and where we're spending our money. And for what it's worth, I would like my son to use both. So I would like him to come home with excellent handwriting. I'd like him to do lots of writing on paper, and I'd like him to be incredibly computer literate so that he can do whatever he needs to do after school. And whatever that looks like from a funding perspective, just naming that I know it's a balance because paper and Chromebooks cost money, but from my perspective, yeah, he's only 5, but he needs to be fluent in all these things. So please keep those in the budget. And those are all of my comments. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. We do have a hand raised online, Elizabeth.
Can I just make one
Okay,
comment?
before you unmute, one moment.
So thank you, Alyssa. I just wanted to, in terms of the focus on college, I do want to remind folks that just a couple of years ago, we created a second pathway to graduation, which is a 20 credit option, which is more focused on the opportunity to do externships, not on the traditional college-ready pathway. And, I said at the time, if one student takes that opportunity, then it's a win for me. So.
You know how many students are
Currently, I think there's only 3 or 4 that are choosing that in the current senior class, but I think those numbers perhaps will grow over time. But yeah.
Anyone else quickly before Elizabeth makes comment? All right, go ahead and unmute, Elizabeth.
Hi, Elizabeth Sides, 265 Crowell Road. I am going to be quick. I just wanted to clarify. I've gotten frustrated when a few people have said like there's a middle school hockey team. No, and I know you cleared that up. And no, we don't have a football team anymore. So I'm glad those things were also cleared up. Another speaker recently just said like a kindergartner would have a Chromebook. No, I have a 3rd grader, 6th grader, and an 8th grader. The 8th grader is the only one that got a Chromebook in 7th grade. So they share iPads, I think, in the lower classes. So we're not throwing around money for Chromebooks for every child in the district. Not true. And I would just like that to be noted because I think that contributes to a lot of the misinformation that a lot of people have in town when they say things like that, and that's not true. And to Alyssa's request for paper and Chromebook knowledge for her son, who's 5, my kids are all great at both. So they have a lot of paper, and they all know how to use computers way better than I do. That's it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Do we have any other folks who would like to come up and speak this evening? Last call. All right. Then we will go ahead and close public comment. Thank you to everyone who spent the time tonight and joined online and listened. I think this is the most people I've like ever seen dial in on Zoom. So, and it was a pretty healthy public comment. And so, it's just encouraging to see. I think it would be very easy to like stay home or not participate. And I personally, respect and appreciate everyone who makes the time. So thank you. Okay, any other business to come before the committee? Besides scheduling, which we'll get to.
Is the committee going to discuss where they're at in terms of these numbers and give any feedback to the school board as to where we're sitting? And, what we presented tonight was a fully supported draft budget from the school board. And if there is any direction from the budget committee as to changes to this, then we would appreciate hearing that. Or
that's not a question directed just to me. So
no, appreciate hearing where people's thoughts are on what we presented and its financial impacts.
Just go down the line. Okay, so we could handle it 2 ways. We could take sort of an informal like gut check individually, which I think we have done in the past. I don't feel the need to do that. Nor do I think it's totally appropriate given just the presentation just happened. It may be something we could think about doing next week. But what I would say is like, if anybody has strong comments or in particular is thinking about changes, that would be helpful. So first of all, is that fair? Like we can do a more formal gut check kind of next week on how we're feeling. Let everyone sit with it for a week. What, Steve, go ahead.
We're gonna cater the senior party, so he can take $2,500 out of the budget for that.
You're always feeding somebody, Steve.
What's that? Sorry, my audio's bad.
Oh, that is great.
Okay, there you have it. There's one change.
Happy to voice my support. I think it's incredible in the inflationary era we're seeing these days, especially on healthcare costs, to see the budget is actually an overall decrease outside of the mandated special ed increase. So I also appreciated the last meeting we had in a great level of detail, like what the original requests were relative to the pushback in the process. And so there was stuff on that list that I think would be great to see added to the school budget and was sort of painful to see it go away. So appreciate the work that's been done so far.
Mark? Oh, you don't have your own mic, sorry.
It's okay, I can share with Rob. Rob, thank you. I thought the budget was very well presented and explained. So you all have done a phenomenal job. And you do a particularly good job explaining it. So thank you for all that. I think the only, I'm not exactly sure how to even put the question out there. You got 1.762 million increase, of which 775,000 is state mandated special ed. And more than about half the remainder is the contracts. If someone was to ask you, because they're poking at any individual item in the budget, because for me, I'm not going to poke at any individual item in the budget. I don't want to get down to that micro level, but to say, I think sort of the point of like, hey, we're not sure our community can absorb $1.7 million a year in increases in the school budget. What does it mean if someone gets up on the, if this budget moves forward as is and someone gets up on the floor and proposes to reduce it by $250,000 or $500,000, what does that mean? What might that look like? That's kind of the question that's in my head, because I think when people say, hey, we should find a way to reduce this budget because it's going to knock some people out of our town. I try to pair it with, yeah, I get that. And so if we were to reduce that budget, what is the reduction in services, teachers, whatever it might be? I know I'm putting you on the spot and you can only say so much, but that's what's in my head. Because I think that's probably what's in a lot of people's heads when they say, could we bring this down?
So I think it depends where the money is. If we're talking about a warrant and we're talking about reducing one of the warrant articles, then we're simply delaying future need for revenue. If it's in the operating budget, then more likely than not, it's in teachers and or IAs. That's pretty, I mean, if we want to talk about small money, yeah, we can look for small money without doing that. And by small money, I mean tens of thousands of dollars. But if you're looking for hundreds of thousands of dollars, the only way to do that is in positions. And the difficulty becomes, where would that be? And if it's in some ways, because most IAs are associated with IEPs, it's not going to be there. So it's more likely than not going to be teaching positions.
If you're looking at the warrant articles, you really only got one that you got much chance to do anything with. And that's the CIP one. Yeah, you're kind of locked into the philosophy of the special ed. You either shoot yourself in the foot now, you wait a little bit and not have that cushion of 225. And the others are peanuts. Technology, the motor vehicle, you can't do anything with the contracts, basically, other than vote them down. And I don't think anybody's in a mood to do that. They've been negotiated. So, the CIP, and that's kicking the can down the road again. And again, it's relatively small change. If you did the whole thing, it's 275. So it really gives, to my mind, if we're going to recommend a decrease here, it's got to be in the staffing, which means difference in class size are dropping out some programs that we've historically had. which ones are those going to be? They're going to be AP courses? You've got a heck of a recommendation, a reputation of having kids be able to, at that high end, to be able to use those to get into the schools that they wish to get into. I totally agree with the thought that we need to put somehow more emphasis into the trades. There's a philosophy that says we ought to not call it trades anymore. We ought to call it profession. Plumbing profession, electrician profession, they certainly make a heck of a lot more money starting out than anybody who's spent, many hundreds of thousands of dollars of going to schools and then can't find a job. And their whole career is already stable. They're already $400,000 ahead, perhaps. But we're fortunate, I think, that we've got the Concord program, where a certain amount of kids, and I understand more and more kids are doing that program. And I have a granddaughter that went through there, and it did her a really, really good job for her. But again, I think we need to, how we do that, put more emphasis into the professional trade type environment education. But again, I think the school did a very good job, and you take the special ed out of that, and that's a pretty darn good effort. But again, our town is really in trouble because we just do not have the tax base to support what we've been used to having.
Yeah, just to cap that, I think that's where I am too. I don't even necessarily myself feel ready for a gut check like today, if I'm gonna be totally honest, like, because value system wise, I look at every one of these and they line up with my values, right? Like, don't kick the can down the road. We need to support special ed. We want to support our teachers who don't make, a ton of money, and obviously our custodial staff as is. And I know exactly, like I think Charlie mentioned the stuff that was taken out already of the operating budget asks. And the operating budget on its own is not a substantial increase. So it's just it's not an easy, and then you add it together, it's still like, like a 6% increase.
What is the exact increase? I come up with two different numbers. I come up with 6.11%, and you came up with 5.73. So
I come up with 5.79 because if you look at the all warrants tax impacts for 24-25, it was 27,246, 462. And then we're to 28,808. So that's that difference of 1.7. So the percentage difference between the 27,246 and the 28,808 should be 5.73%.
Okay. I guess the feedback I'd like to give to the school board, that in reference to your question, is that, if I go back in the town report to 2021, 2022, we had 189 FTEs, 189 full-time equivalent positions. And this budget is calling for 198. So that's nine full-time position increases without an increase in the number of students. And I know that we've added some positions at the administration over the years, and of course the special ed budget requires a lot of extra labor too. But I'm having trouble hiring more people. That's where I'm at now. The budget is really high. It's been climbed really high through the COVID years, through the inflation years. The number of students hasn't gone up, but yet we're still talking about hiring more people. That's where I'm hung up right now. I can't give you an answer right now. What the gut check feeling is, but talking with people that I know in the community, they're facing another $800, $1,000, whatever the value of their house is, increase again, and they're asking why, when the student numbers aren't going up. So that's just the feedback.
Can I ask you a question about where those FTEs are? So like a lot of those are IA positions, which again are attached to those IEPs. We're talking about that morphing of the curriculum coordinator to a special ed case manager.
Yep.
So you and I have had this conversation many times about the FTEs relative to the student populations. And, you know, you still need to run certain classes. You still have a class size, and while the population may not be changing that much, those class size policies, there's not enough of a change to merit adding, but there's also not enough of a change to merit decreasing.
Right.
So.
Steve, do you want to chime in? I see that you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on what Don was saying.
are you
Actually
there?
having some experience with one of our kids that went to the CRTC program, and they are so full up that he couldn't get the major or the specialty that he wanted. So I think people are recognizing the benefits of those programs, but there's basically one facility that we have access to that supports that. So how do you expand those opportunities? Do you approach businesses in town to do internships that are accredited? Are there other places that we can send our kids? I mean, those are
And I
just
think-
questions I've been arguing for a couple of years that we need to think outside the box, and maybe this is an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Go ahead. Do you want to finish what you're saying, Debbie?
I agree with, we have to think outside of the box too, but I just think as a budget committee, we need to look at the future, which we do. And are we increasing the population of our town? There's a lot being said about increasing homes and growth. And I think we need to see what we're saying, that, well, the population, you know, our student population, we need all the teachers, or do we have to hire more teachers? And I think that's in direct correlation with some of the other decisions that the town may be faced with down the road. It's going to be a direct impact on what we're faced with our school budget also. And I just think we need to look at the whole picture. It's not just the school that has the budget that they have. We will be faced with even more if we're not careful how we want to proceed as a town too. It's just my feeling.
I don't know if that gives you the clarity you're looking for, Rob. Is that useful feedback a little bit?
You know, we'll have a meeting next week and give people time to think. I was just wanted to.
Yeah.
Litmus test, so to speak.
All right, so just an update on schedule. We are meeting next week, next Wednesday, same time, same place. For follow-up from the precinct presentations and general follow-up. Of which this will be a topic, so I can work with you on the agenda on that, Neil, and we'll make sure that each item is itemized. Any other business before we adjourn? Okay,
When is our public hearing?
I have to open it up. Thank you.
This is an enormous ask, but would there be any appetite to move that public hearing 1 week earlier? And I only say that, it's totally self-serving. My daughter, who lives on the West Coast, called a couple weeks ago and says, "Hey, I'd love to come home for a week." We said, "That'd be great. Let's go and we'll take a little 3-day trip up north." And guess when that week is? It's the 12th. And I will be away Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And I love you all very much, but I love my daughter more. So I would prefer.
Well, that hurts.
Sorry, and then I know that is an enormous ask, but if there is any appetite to moving that to the week earlier, because I would love to be here for the public hearing. Otherwise, I will not be here. Dulcie will be here in my stead if that is the case, and she is more than capable, but anyway.
Oh, I think the school's gonna be involved. Town's gonna be involved.
What a rock and a
It's not
hard
us.
place that is.
I'll second Rob's request. I think it's pretty important that he be here.
Okay.
All right,
I'm fine moving it up a week.
okay. Neil, are you just out the fifth? Like, or like can't be here the fifth, or like, what if we didn't do it on a Wednesday? Just. Okay. Okay. Is there any like thing legally that we have to do it on a Wednesday?
But that's.
Okay, it's tradition.
Well, at least there's somebody. So.
Okay, I'm open to either. I mean, we can have it on the fifth and try to get by without Neil, or we could move it to like the sixth. Which is a Thursday, or the fourth, which is a Tuesday.
I always like to have Neil here as my backup.
Right.
So I prefer a date that he would be available.
That's not the sixth. What? Oh, right, now we're ourselves in. Okay. Can we do it before the school board meeting, Dulcie? Or is there, can that not happen? On like the third? Is there?
Thursday.
Mark can't do Thursday. No one wants to be here Friday night. What about Monday, the 10th?
That's a sweat.
Okay, all right. Can you join remotely or are you totally out on the 6th? Not to put pressure on you, just.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Okay. Yep, yeah, I get it. It's no pressure situation, just asking. Yeah. All right. I am,
Can
go
we
ahead.
decide next week when everybody's had more time to look at their calendars?
Yeah. Yeah.
The eighth.
All right, I think it sounds like only the 5th would work except for Neil. And the 12th, we will not have Rob. So there's not a good answer. Just tried to find other good answers. I guess we could do the 13th in theory. That's my last ditch effort.
Are you still up north on the 13th?
Oh, Mark won't be here on the 13th. Okay. All right. So I'm tempted to put it to a roll call vote. Like, I know, Ken, you just voiced that you'd prefer to have Neil here as backup. And others have voiced that they prefer to have Rob here to answer questions about school board. So.
Who would like this?
I'm really sorry for.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
I thought I would ask.
Because there's not a good and because there's not a great answer here. I feel somewhat inclined to keep the original date and ask Dulcie to fill in if that's possible.
Yes, that is definitely possible.
Norm says he's gonna play backup. Just because it does not feel like there's a straightforward consensus, and so I'm going to just become a mini dictator. Decide that's what we're gonna do.
Good, I like it.
Is that okay with you, Dulcie? Okay. All right, that is what we are going to do. I'm sorry, Rob.
No, that's fine.
We did try to accommodate a few other dates.
Elsie and I have already commiserated about this, but I thought I would ask because you don't know until you ask, so.
It's very fair. All right, any other business to come before the board tonight? Okay, with that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, thirded.
I think we need to roll call it.
Fourth.
You don't think I do? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Boy.